Hello, welcome to Heady Remarks. Today is March 11th, 2023, and I'm talking about the Celts, the Ancient Celts. And we got Archie. Can't see him. You can't see him, but can you see him? See his knee? I don't know what body part that is. Part of his leg. Well, it's kind of a hard topic because right from the get-go, like everything you go to try and learn about the Celts, like the Celtic world, great courses thing starts right off going, the term Celtic often evokes two different and not entirely compatible images. One is that of the ancient warriors who rampaged across Europe and terrified the Greeks and Romans. The other is of the warm, welcoming nations of the fringes of Europe, known for their music, arts, poetry, and spirituality. Are these really the same people? And if so, how did one evolve into the other? The answer, as it turns out, is complicated. The story we had for a long time was of a single unified cultural group that emerged in the central part of Europe, migrated westward, and were finally all but pushed off the continent by conflict with Roman legions and Germanic tribes. However, over the past several decades, new research in archaeology, linguistics, and even DNA has revealed surprising new information and raised quite a few more questions about who the Celts really were and are. So yeah. So I guess initially, we have two main things to look at to try to answer the question. It's language and archaeology. So, like, Celtic art barely made it to Spain, yet some things make it seem like the language originated there. Oh, by the way, if I say something that turns out to be totally wrong, I'm really sorry. Feel free to completely correct me. You can comment and correct me. It's not on purpose. I was just trying to learn about them. We'll see what information I retained, but my brain kind of goes blank as soon as I hit the button to go live sometimes because I'm nervous. So there's that. But I do have about a gazillion tabs open to guide me. So there's that. Maybe we should watch a video that I had pulled up. Where is it? Sort of it's one of those captivating history things. Let's do the entire screen. Share audio. Okay, so this is just one of those like quick, who are they? What are they? Let's find out together. Let's just explore and marinate and bounce around in this Celtic world together.
History. The Celtic culture today is so closely linked to Ireland that it is hard to remember there were once tribes of Celtic speakers throughout Germany, Poland, Italy, Austria, Switzerland, Spain, France, and...
Hold on, I want to go back to the map. So, like, initially, it was thought that this was where they originated, like an Austria kind of area. Oh, here we go. I knew he would be here. Tribal defender. Spain was Celtic, just like Gaul. Their faith was just as similar as the language. Scottish Gaelic speakers can understand Celtiberian, Brythonic, and Gaulish with little issues. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, you definitely know way more about it than I do. I'll tell you that right now. But I tried to absorb as much as I could. And I didn't think that it would be like that big of a controversial topic, but some people, I guess, like the English, some of them maybe feel like othered because they're not in like the Celtic fringe club of like Ireland, Wales, Scotland, and there's somewhere right here in the northwest of Spain called Galicia. that is still has Celtic. Oh God, this is horrible. Let's just play the video.
Austria, Switzerland, Spain, France, and on the...
Oh, you know what? I should have grabbed my earbuds. Dang it. Because I think that sometimes it creates an echo. Just one sec. One sec. These are for Archie to play with. That's why I hung those on the doorknob there. Okay. I'm really sorry if I say anything that's wrong. Totally feel free to correct me. Okay, we'll continue now.
The British Isles. The Celts left an indelible mark on Europe, but left us little in the way.
Hold on. So they always show Stonehenge, but from what I read, because there's the Druids. The Druids are like the kind of like the religious leaders. They also served as like judges for stuff, and they worshipped in oak groves, from what I understood. So I don't know if Celts ever actually had it might have been like the ancestors of who became the Celts that created Stonehenge, but the Great Courses lady was saying they probably didn't worship at Stonehenge, but yeah, I don't know. The term druid translates to scholar. Yeah, I had a picture pulled up. Where is that? It was like, oh, geez. This is going to be a mess. Let's see. I just took a picture of like when it was showing. I also just pulled up a bunch of pretty pictures of Scotland because I think it's pretty. Where is that? Oh, damn it. It was like Wise One or something. Yeah, and what was it, like 25 years they had to, damn it. For like 25 years they had to prepare to become a druid. And it was like a long process to become one. Where the heck is that? Dang it. I don't know. I have way too many things open. Oh, there we go. Oh, geez. I have way too many things open. It's ridiculous. Oh my God. This is horrible. Ugh. One sec. Deep knowledge of the oak. Okay, well, anyway, I'll just continue with this for a second here.
Historical documents. Lacking a written language, much of the oral stories of the Celts have been lost to time, forcing historians to piece together their culture from shreds of evidence. Still, we know that the Celts plundered village after village to expand their territory from roughly 500 BCE to 100 BCE. The Celts built a culture that was intriguing, spiritual, and artistic, yet the various Celtic tribes failed to work together as a cohesive unit. That flaw led to their eventual downfall. The Celts retreated to the relative safety of Ireland and quietly continued their unique traditions. Let's look at this once mighty yet disorganized group of people and learn how their history is interwoven with the history of the European continent. While most people assume that the Celts hailed from Ireland, maybe they may have originated near the Danube River in Central Europe as far back as 1200 BCE. Both the Roman...
Yeah, so this covers the course of, this topic encompasses like 3,000 years worth of history, so it's a lot.
And the Greeks made references about them.
Oh, and Celt comes from the Greek word keltoi, which was with a K. turned into being spelled with a C, and it meant the tall ones, because there was like, I guess it was like a stereotype that they tended to stand like a head taller than the Romans, but people said that wasn't necessarily actually true, but maybe they met a bunch of pretty tall ones and they were like, oh, they're all taller than us, but...
Noting that they lived in northern Europe and Gaul, in present-day France. The Celts, while widespread across the region, were clustered in farming communities. They established thriving trade routes, putting them in contact with other groups. However, anthropologists believe that the different group of Celts were mostly unrelated to each other. Anthropologists put forth a theory that parts of Europe underwent a Celtization process in which various tribes appropriated or adopted the Celtic ways and their language. Despite the vast territory covered by Celts, there never seemed to be a united, cohesive Celtic culture.
Hold on. I want to look at that. Okay. Yeah, because wait, no, there's Galatia. Yeah, so there were some Gauls. Here's Gaul. I think Hallstatt's where they found a lot of like the tombs, where they found a lot of archaeology and stuff. I guess they found it all over, and then after fighting with the Greeks, some of them broke off and went over to Galatia, and I guess that's modern day Turkey. They call it Anatolia. I guess that's what it was called back then. So, yeah, all over. And then the Romans are over here. They were kicking the Romans' butts before the Romans became like the mighty empire that they did.
Instead, the different groups
Tribal Defender says, funny how they always describe us as disorganized till the church came around, of course. Yeah, that's kind of funny. Like, I mean, they always say that like their weakness was their lack of unity, which but then when people started to unite, because it inspired like the nationalism and stuff in Ireland and whatnot. So then they were like, oh no, you guys are not the same people. I don't know. It's like they don't like anything that can inspire that unity, but I don't know.
Maintained their independence until they were eventually integrated into other European cultures. Without textual evidence, historians cannot know why some of the Celtic societies died out when the tribes spread so far across Europe. While the evidence is lacking because there are no written accounts from the Celts, researchers can understand the Celtic culture from linguistic evidence. It is believed that the Celtic language emerged between 1200 and 450 BCE from a Proto-Celtic branch of the Indo-European language family. This same branch eventually produced many present-day languages, including French, German, English, Persian, Portuguese, Hindi, Spanish, and Italian. The Celtic language split into the Insular group, which eventually became the tongue spoken on the British Isles, and the Continental group that covered the rest of Europe. The Continental branch died out long ago, but the Insular branch still exists today. As early as around 1200 BCE, the Celtic migration spread the Celtic culture into the Iberian Peninsula, the site of present-day Portugal and Spain. They interbred with the indigenous people of the region and Celtized them. This blended culture was distinctive. It drew on elements of the native Iberians and the Celts, and later the Romans. Land in the Iberian Peninsula often flip-flopped between Roman ownership and Carthage ownership. Many of the Celtic tribes sided with the Carthage and fought against the Romans. In time, the Romans emerged as the dominant force on the Iberian Peninsula. The Celtiberians, as they were known, were an easy conquest for the advancing Roman armies. Between about 58 to 50 BC, Rome's Julius Caesar engaged his army in the Gallic Wars, a series of military battles against several Celtic tribes in the region known as Gaul, or present-day France and Belgium. The Celts had an army as significant and courageous as the Romans, but they lacked central organization. Still, they went head-to-head with the formidable Roman army several times, leading to the Battle of Alesia in 52 BC, the decisive campaign that ended in a Roman victory. The battle might have gone in the Celts' favor, but an attempt by the Celtic chieftain, Vercingetorix, to unify the tribes
he said it weird.
A unilateral front against...
I've been saying Vercingetorix. Is it Vercingetorix?
against the Roman forces did not come in time. Today, many historians agree that the Gallic Wars were not fought for power.
Mickey Fruit Loops. Meow, meow. Yes. This guy is not talking about the Ogham writings or Leptonic alphabet? Shit. See, I haven't even heard of those. Dang it. Hey, Archie. Yeah. Say hi, Archie. Mwah. So they... Hold on. I have to look that up now. Well, okay. Let me just finish
Power or territory, as much as they were fought to bolster Julius Caesar's reputation and enforce his political position. An old saying states, history is written by the victors. Here, it is true. Most of the information we have about the Gallic Wars comes from a single source, Commentarii de Bello Gallico, written by Caesar. It is unclear when and why the Celts spread to the British Isles, but by the 1st century BCE, they were well established in Britannia. The Britons, who were living on the island, adopted the Celtic language and rituals, but were much more tenacious than their European counterparts. They kept the invading Romans at bay for several years. Even after the Roman conquest of the British Isles, pockets of Celts remained independent in some of the northern reaches. Because of this, the Celtic culture outlasted the Roman occupation of the region. When the Romans ruled Britannia, they tried to suppress the Celtic culture. Historians have uncovered evidence that leads them to believe that the Romans intentionally prevented the Celts from inventing a written language. Finally, in the 6th century BCE, after the Roman occupation of the British Isles was over, a written version of the Celtic language was developed. For the first time, the rich oral stories of the Celts were recorded. Having a written language allowed the Celts to advance their mythology, customs, and laws. During the Roman occupation of the British Isles, various Celtic leaders waged resistance campaigns against Rome's legions. Some of these accounts of rebellion provided the foundation of Celtic legends and folklore, such as the story of Boudica. According to legend,
I've been saying Boudica. Dang it.
Boudica was married to the Iceni tribe's chieftain, not far from the city of London. Her husband had established a makeshift alliance with the Roman invaders to keep his tribal lands intact. When he died, however, the Romans no longer honored the agreement, and the Roman governor, Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, set his sights on the island of Anglesey, then called Mona, off the coast of Wales. To protect the Iceni land, Boudica rallied the tribe's army and launched a massive assault on the Romans in 61 AD. At first, Boudica succeeded. Under her command, the Celtic army defeated 2 Roman towns, Londinium and Verulamium, burning them to the ground. Gaius Suetonius Paulinus gathered his defeated troops and prepared for another attack. Meanwhile, Boudica recruited men from neighboring Celtic tribes to boost her numbers. Although the Romans were gearing up for battle, back in Rome, Emperor Nero was so concerned about Boudica's initial defeat of his men, he considered pulling all the Roman troops out of the British Isles. In their next clash, however, Suetonius's army swiftly defeated Boudica to regain control over the area. Shortly after the battle, Boudica died, either by suicide or illness, depending on the version of her story. During the Victorian era, the British people rediscovered the story of Queen Boudica, and she became a national folk hero. Stories based in fact, like that of Boudica, were added to the myths and folklore of the Celts. A polytheistic culture, the Celts worship
that's called the Gundestrup Cauldron, I believe. I feel like I have fur in my mouth. I heard that this might not have actually been Celtic either. I don't know, like, I can't remember why. Something about what's on it not matching something, but it's often associated, sort of like Stonehenge. That's sort of similar. Like, I kept hearing people say it was a mistaken thing. I don't know, but okay.
Collection of deities. Like the gods and goddesses of the Greek and Roman pantheon, the key figures of the Celtic religion lord over specific aspects of the natural world. Although there were venerated Celtic temples, many of the religious ceremonies were held outdoors, in sacred groves, or beneath hallowed oak trees, or near rocky outcroppings. Historians of the past credited the construction of Stonehenge in England to the Celts. But modern carbon dating of the site indicates that it was constructed at least 1,000 years before the Celtic people arrived on the British Isles.
Oh.
In Celtic society, the Druids belonged to the learned
Okay,
class.
but when he says arrived, like, it, from what the Great Courses lady was saying, she was saying that there was never like an invasion, just that, I mean, they might have like actually moved there and stuff, but there was like not like a, as far as I can tell, there wasn't like some big invasion, violent invasion or anything like that. It was just like trade routes. The culture spread, the art spread, you know, like they have the spirals that is recognized as Celtic art, the animals they would draw, and like it might have just been adopted by people who liked it.
Therefore, they presided over the religious rituals of the Celts. They provided spiritual guidance, administered sacred rites, and cast spells to ward off evil spirits. Beyond that, the Druids' role remains largely unknown because the Celts did not leave a written record. According to several historians,
Yeah, they thought that if you couldn't remember something off the top of your head, it was like the sign of a weak mind, which I can actually understand. It's just kind of unfortunate that there isn't more that we can find. I kind of wish they did write their stuff down, I guess that's what I'm saying.
it is likely that the Druids oversaw humans'
And it was secret.
sacrifice rituals and perhaps headhunting. Historians have gleaned some understanding of the religion of the Celts by examining Irish myths and folklore. However, this may cause an inaccurate look at the Celtic religion. That's because the Celts' spiritual beliefs merged with the Roman religion during the Roman occupation of the British Isles. Later, when Christianity was introduced across the island in the 5th and 6th centuries, the original myths took on a biblical slant. With no written language of their own, many of the Celtic folk tales were recorded on paper for the first time by Christian scribes, who injected the tales with Christian morals. Many aspects of the Celtic culture remain shrouded in mystery, simply because the Celts did not have a written language. Despite the lack of textual evidence, we know that the Celtic culture was, at one time, widespread throughout the European continent. While they had sheer numbers, they failed to organize themselves into a central group. They remained a loose collection of tribes, each with their army. Through their interactions with the Romans, Greeks,
the gods gave them the land, just like the chosen tribe.
And other civilizations, we learn of their military prowess, traditions, and territory. Their disorganization contributed to their decline until they were relocated to the British Isles. While the Celts influenced Europe's cultures, they are more closely linked to the Irish and Welsh, who still speak a Celtic language to this day. To discover more about the ancient...
My father was Welsh, and I remember when I was there in Wales, there were all their signs, like their traffic signs and stuff, had English and Welsh, and they were really serious about holding on to that language, and I'm glad. I guess it's just kind of hard to get people to actually... I think they teach it in the schools there. Like Wales has, it seems like they've done, I think that they said that they were like the only one that, oh, never mind. I don't know what I was, hold on. Albert Spear says, howdy back. Right back at you. Oh God, I don't even know where to go from here. So what do we do? Maybe this can sort of guide me. Wait, hold on. What did that say? The answer is complicated. Oh, and I want to also look up what you were just saying before I forget. Leptonic alphabet. The other thing. Ogam? Should I avoid Wikipedia? Let's see. Omniglot.com? Lepontic. Wait, Lepontic? Is that what that was supposed to say? Oh, Lepontic. Okay, that sounds right. An extinct continental Celtic language, once spoken in parts of Raetia and Cisalpine Gaul, now northern Italy, between about 550 and 100 BC. Lepontic is considered by some scholars to be a form of Cisalpine Gaulish Celtic and a dialect of Gaulish. Others, such as M. Lejeune, I'm so sorry, believe that it was a distinct continental Celtic language. Lepontic was displaced first by Gaulish after Gaulish tribes settled in the area where it was spoken, and then by Latin after the Romans took control of that area during the late 2nd and 1st century. Lepontic was the first Celtic language to be written, and inscriptions in Lepontic. So why do they keep saying that they didn't have written language? Maybe it was just so much later that it wasn't considered the ancient Celts anymore, maybe. Inscriptions in Lepontic have been found in and around Lugano in Switzerland and in the areas around Lake Como and Lake Maggiore in northern Italy. They appear on monuments, coins, cups, pots, and other objects. Most are in Lepontic or Lugano alphabet. Others are in the Latin alphabet. The Lepontic alphabet was derived from the Etruscan alphabet. Interesting. And you can see what it looks like there. Finis. Does that mean family? Actually, I think Finna means family. But I think that was in like Irish or something. Interesting. Okay, let's see what this is. Ogham alphabet. I'm probably saying it wrong. Ogham. Is it Ogham? Is an alphabet that appears on monumental inscriptions dating from the 4th to the 6th century AD and in manuscripts dating from the 6th to the 9th century. Yeah, so this whole Celtic thing starts at the end of the Bronze Age, and then you go into the Iron Age, and then continues right up until present times. In manuscripts dating from the 6th to the 9th century, it was used mainly to write primitive and Old Irish and also to write Old Welsh, Pictish, and Latin. It was inscribed on stone monuments throughout Ireland, particularly Kerry, Cork, and Waterford, and in England, Scotland, the Isle of Man, and Wales, particularly in Pembrokeshire and South Wales. The name Ogham is pronounced Ogham or Ogham. Oh, I would not have known that's how you pronounce it. Gauls also use Eastern Greek alphabet. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, it seems like they were a little more, friendly with the Greeks. I know they fought with the Greeks, but they also, everyone sort of like respected each other a bit. Because the Gauls, they were like really fierce fighters and really tenacious and strong warriors, and the Romans kind of respected that. And I think that like the Druids and stuff were kind of friendly with the Greeks a little bit at one point. Again, it's hard to say. We're talking about such a big chunk of time. It's like when at some point, I don't know, kind of friendly, but they did fight with them. I know that, but they seemed to kind of respect each other. I don't know, but a number of letters, 25, are grouped into 5. Each is named after its first letter. So that's what that looks like. So they do have language and alphabets and stuff. But I guess it's just tricky to find. Maybe I can start Xing out of these as I go. I have this song pulled up from Last of the Mohicans just because it's beautiful and I love it. I was going to rewatch The Last of the Mohicans for that reason. I'm kind of confused why a movie about the French Indian War, is that the one? Why it's got like a Celtic music as its thing. So I think the main character maybe he was supposed to be like half Celtic or something, if I remember correctly. I should have rewatched it, but I didn't. Hello, Shane. Welcome to the party, pal. I don't know. Maybe I'll save that for when I might have to go to the bathroom and I can play it or something. Okay, I'm just gonna go through what the heck I've got pulled up here. Got a million. What is this? Why did I pull this up? I have no idea. The Bardus of Isla Morgan. I can't pronounce. I have no idea why I have that pulled up. I'm gonna X out. The 4 Ancient Books of Wales. Huh. This is William Skeen's anthology of Dark Age Welsh bardic poetry. Often cited but difficult to obtain, this book contains every remaining piece of bardic poetry known. Yeah, the bards. Shane says, did you happen to check out Women of the Celts? Well, I saw something that said that it was rare, but that they could be druids. And I know there was one famous Celt lady who was found, who was buried in such a way that it was like, she was important, I guess. She had like a shitload of, was it wine? Might have been mead. Like, I don't know, buried where she was. And I guess that means that she, I don't know. I mean, a little bit, yeah. There's that Boudica lady, Queen Boudica. I think one of the things I watched said that when she attacked the Romanized area of Britain, that they can see when they dig that there's like a spot in the history. It's like black from when they burnt it down, if that makes sense. I'm so bad at explaining things. I'm really sorry. But okay, I kind of want to look at this because, I mean, DNA study shows Celts are not a unique genetic group. That's great. Like, who cares? Like, why are we focusing on that? I mean, it's just kind of weird. Like, you do get the feeling that they're trying to keep them from feeling united by anything, you know? They're like, you guys aren't even the same. Albert Spear says, I saw Last of the Mohicans while doing mushrooms. All I remember about the movie was Hawkeye running the whole movie. I had leg cramps by the time it was done. Hawkeye? Do you mean the guy from There Will Be Blood? I can't remember his name because I'm alive. I can't remember things when I'm alive. Daniel Day-Lewis. So, okay, a DNA study of Britons has shown that genetically there's not a unique Celtic group of people in the UK. It's like, that's great. But you're trying to deter them from like feeling connected to each other? I don't know. According to the data, those of Celtic ancestry in Scotland and Cornwall are more similar to the English than they are to other Celtic groups. Hawkeye is Daniel Day-Lewis. Oh, okay. I think of that other guy when I hear Hawkeye, but the guy who just got injured horribly on it was a snowplow, I think. He's like still in the hospital recovering right now. Renner? Yeah. According to the data, the study also describes distinct genetic differences across the UK, which reflect regional identities, and it shows that the invading Anglo-Saxons did not wipe out the Britons of 1,500 years ago, but mixed with them. Published in the journal Nature, the findings emerged from a detailed DNA analysis of 2,000 mostly middle-aged Caucasian people living across the UK. The individuals included had all 4 of their grandparents living close to each other in a rural area. The selection criterion enabled the researchers led from Oxford University to filter out 20th century immigration and to peer back to migration patterns more than 1,000 years ago. Striking similarities. Jeremy Renner, yes, thank you. According to Professor Peter Donnelly, who co-led the study, the results show that although there is not a single Celtic group, there is a genetic basis for regional identities in the UK. Many of the genetic clusters we see in the West and North are similar to the tribal groupings and kingdoms around and just after the time of the Saxon invasion, suggesting these kingdoms maintained a regional identity for many years. Professor Donnelly and his colleagues compared genetic patterns now with the map of Britain in about AD 600, after the Anglo-Saxons had arrived from what is now southern Denmark and northern Germany. By then, they occupied much of central and southern England. We see Archie, no! Why do you do this? Bad kitty! we see striking similarities between the genetic patterns we see now and some of these regional identities and kingdoms we see in AD 600, and we think some of that may well be remnants of the groupings that existed then, he explained. A map of different genetic groupings reveals subtle but distinct differences between those sampled in West Yorkshire and the rest of the country. Okay. Who do you think you are? This genetic map might tell you. Each color represents a different genetic group. Many correspond very closely to county borders, indicating a genetic basis for regional identities. The Wellcome Trust-funded study, which is part of the People of the British Isles research project, also found that people in the north of England are genetically more similar to people in Scotland than they are to those in the south of England. Okay, makes sense. It also finds that people in the North and South Wales are more different from each other than the English are from the Scots, and that there are two genetic groupings in Northern Ireland. Okay. Professor Mark Robinson, an archaeologist who works with Professor Donnelly at Oxford University, said he was very surprised that Celtic groups in Cornwall, Wales, Northern Ireland, and Scotland had such different genetic patterns. I had assumed at the very early stages of the project that there was going to be this uniform Celtic fringe extending from Cornwall through to Wales into Scotland, and this has very definitely not been the case, he told BBC News. The researchers did see distinct genetic groups within those regions, but those groups were quite different from each other. Although people from Cornwall have a Celtic heritage, genetically they are much, much more similar to the people elsewhere in England than they are to the Welsh, for example, said Professor Donnelly. People in South Wales are also quite different genetically to people in North Wales. Yeah, you already said that. Who are both different in turn to the Scots. We did not find a single genetic group corresponding to the Celtic traditions in the western fringes of Britain. The finding is the first genetic evidence to confirm what some archaeologists have long been arguing, that Celts represent a tradition or culture rather than a genetic or racial grouping. Okay, that's fine. Like, what's the big deal? Professor Robinson noted that the results also shed light on what happened during Britain's Dark Ages in the years between AD 400 and AD 600 after the Romans left. Towns were abandoned, the language over much of what became England changed to Anglo-Saxon, which became English, pottery styles altered, so too even the cereals that were grown following the arrival of people from the base of the southwest Danish peninsula and northwestern Germany, the Anglo-Saxons. Some historians and archaeologists had wondered whether these changes occurred as a result of the Saxons entirely replacing the existing population as they moved westwards. That might have happened if the Saxons introduced disease, for example. Other researchers suggested that the existing population simply dropped their old ways and adopted the Saxon way of life. The new analysis shows a modest level of Saxon DNA, suggesting that the native British populations lived alongside each other and intermingled with the Anglo-Saxons to become the English. There is some evidence in the study that intermingling did not happen immediately following the Saxons' arrival, but occurred at least 100 years later. This suggests that Britons and Saxons had separate communities to begin with, and then over time they began to merge. Northern Irish groupings. This may well be one of the first instances where genetics has been used to clear up historical controversy. The study, I just really didn't think this would be such a controversial topic, but the study seems to confirm the view that Celts retained their identity in western and northern areas of England, where the regions were incorporated into Anglo-Saxon territory by conquest. But what could account for the variation in the DNA of those Celtic ancestry in Cornwall, Wales, and Scotland? Time would be one possibility, according to Professor Donnelly. If groups had been separated for a period of time, they will diverge genetically to some of the differences we see genetically are the result of those kinds of effects. The study also notes that there are two genetic groupings in Northern Ireland, one of which contains individuals across the sea in Western Scotland and the Highlands. The other contains individuals in Southern Scotland and Southern England. This is kind of interesting. So Scotland is called Scotland, right? It comes from an Irish tribe called the Scotty. That's the end of my interesting tidbit there. I guess they went over there. The other contains individuals in Southern Scotland and Southern England. The former appears to reflect the kingdom of Dalriada 1,500 years ago. The other probably represents the settlers of the Ulster plantations. And in Orkney, the study finds clear evidence of Norwegian DNA. Yeah, the Vikings got into Ireland and brought like the battle axe and a lot of silver and stuff and some of their art and got their influence in there. The former appears to reflect the kingdom of Dalriada, represents the settlers of the Ulster plantations. I don't know what those are, and in Orkney, the study finds very clear evidence of Norwegian DNA as might be expected from the Viking settlements of the islands. Interestingly, it persists at fairly low levels, suggesting that the Vikings and the existing populations coexisted and intermingled more than people had expected in the way that occurs with the Anglo-Saxons. The Viking armies that laid waste to parts of England and for a while ruled what became known as the Danelaw. Yeah, Ireland has a ton of major cities like Dublin, sorry, I don't know that came from Vikings. Left little, if any, genetic trace confirming that their success was due to their military prowess rather than large-scale population movement. Likewise, the Norman conquest of England did not leave any genetic evidence. Okay, got through that. I can X out. Okay, Tène culture. Now we're going out of order as usual. Like going way farther back, the Tène culture is like the European Celts. So a European Iron Age culture developed and flourished during the late Iron Age from about 450 BC to the Roman conquest in the 1st century, succeeding the early Iron Age Hallstatt culture. Yeah, that's where a lot of these like videos I watched, they start with the Hallstatt culture in that sort of Central Europe area, like Austria-ish, without any definite cultural break. Under considerable Mediterranean influence from the Greeks in pre-Roman Gaul, the Etruscans, and the Goliseca culture, but whose artistic style nevertheless did not depend on those Mediterranean influences. The Tène culture's territorial extent corresponded to what is now France, Belgium, Switzerland, Austria, England, southern Germany, the Czech Republic, northern Italy, and central Italy. Slovenia, Hungary, and Liechtenstein, I'm so sorry, as well as adjacent parts of the Netherlands, Slovakia, Serbia, Croatia, Transylvania, Western Romania, and I don't know why I did quotes there, and Transcarpathia, Western Ukraine. Okay, yeah, so Galicia, let's make it bigger. Galicia over here in the northwest of Spain was a big Celtic area. And the Celtiberians are in this area too. And then I guess the Italians or the Romans would come sailing over here and fuck with the Celtiberians over here. And this is where Hannibal came from when he came up through, was it the Alps? With his elephants and stuff, and he went and fought with Rome. It was like from this area. Yeah. Okay, let's go back. Oh, okay, no. Ooh. Okay, yeah, so here's the art, the distinctive art. It's a helmet and go away. Celtic art. Ooh, let me just click on that. Let's look at the Celtic art. Get an idea of what that looks like. It's like a Celtic cross. It's like intricate. They really like these. I like drawing like that. When I was little, I used to just draw like. I would just sort of draw stuff that kind of looked like that just because I liked how it looked. Oh yeah, this is supposed to be like to get an idea what they looked like. They seem to have floppy mustaches. That seemed to have been a thing. Floppy mustaches, and I know a lot of the Druids were drawn with like big long beards, almost like Merlin, but that might have been coming from like, dang it, the influence of people who weren't Celts, basically. Just like picturing what they thought, because their wise men looked like that, so that's sort of how they would draw like the Druids. But I do have a picture. Oh God, I have so many pictures up. I might have shown it already, but This is dumb. I'm tired of seeing that. I'm just gonna X out. This is a wooden object found at a Roman fort on Hadrian's Wall in the UK, speculated to be a 2nd century sex toy. Speculated. Okay, so we don't know that for sure. I can X out of that now so I don't keep seeing that. Hadrian's Wall was like supposed to separate I guess Scotland from Britain when it was occupied by the Romans. Anyway, I don't know if that's what that really is, but damn it. I pull up so many links I can't find what I'm looking for when I need to. So this is Celtic art still. What was that? Oh, it's a brooch. Yeah, they would wear like, so their clothing was like pants, a cloak, a brooch, and I guess the women, I don't really know what the women wore. They would wear a cloak too. Oh, this is from the Book of Kells. It's weird because it's like after Ireland went Christian, which the thing I was listening to said that it was almost effortless. Like it wasn't, I don't know, they really took to Christianity quickly and easily, but it was like a Celticized version of it, kind of. So this is just a really pretty cool book that you can see like the people who made it are Christians, but it's still got like it's very Celtic looking. See? And very colorful and pretty and cool. Albert Spears says, everything tubular and unidentified is always a sex toy. I know, like, why would it be just stuck into the wall? I don't know. It's kind of weird. What the heck did I do? Is that the last one? Okay. Well, I don't really, maybe I should go back to this. Yeah, I was trying to find a statue of a druid that I have pulled up somewhere. I probably should have named these. I'm really sorry. Oh, I just saw it. There it is. Okay. So if we want to see what the Celts might have actually pictured, like they made this, you know? So I guess this is supposed to be a druid. It's kind of interesting. Okay, so these things on his head, they were saying that these might have to represent, because they found the actual hat, like it was like a leather looking thing. It might be a mistletoe leaf that's trying to look like, because they really liked mistletoe. It was like magical, sacred. They when they would grow, anything that grows on an oak tree is like considered magical, powerful. And, you know, even though mistletoe is technically a parasite growing on those trees, and it's not going to hurt the tree unless there's like a shitload of mistletoe, like totally invading the entire tree, but they would go and cut it off with a sickle. That's what they think. So that's what a Celt's supposed to look like. Or sorry, a druid. A druid. So I believe he's got the floppy mustache. Shane says, The Secret of Kells is a great animated movie. I actually watched that. So I did watch that, and it was good. The Vikings were like, it was funny how they depicted the Vikings, because they were like scared about the Vikings coming. It's like a little boy who wanted to drop. Yeah, it was really a cool movie, but yeah, it was funny. The Vikings were like big, scary, like, and that book, it was like about the making of that book, I guess. And the kid had to go and find like a special type of plant so they could get a very bright green color that they wanted. The book is really bright. The illustrations and stuff. It's cool. I've got some of those pulled up too. I don't know if I should X out of these as I go. Yeah, so one leaf on the mistletoe is like bigger than the other one, so that's what they were thinking that looked like. I know mistletoe is poisonous. I also have like 6 articles pulled up about that. So, okay, I'm going to X out of that. Medieval Celts. So we got ancient Celts, medieval Celts. The idea of Celtic identity as we know it today was largely developed by historians, writers, and artists of the Celtic revival movement. Yeah, and a lot of the people who wrote about them were Romans, or Greeks. So a lot of the time, like the Romans especially would sort of, I don't know, try to portray them in a not necessarily appealing fashion, because it was sort of propaganda a little bit. They considered them barbarians. And that word apparently came from like the way they thought their language sounded, like bar. I don't really, that's what the lecture lady said, but I don't think Celtic languages sound like that, so I don't know. Oh, the Celtic revival movement, which began in the late 16th century and arguably continues to this day. Oh, and then she talks about music for one of the chapters. Celtic culture. Some of these phenomena are readily recognizable as Celtic in origin. The shamrock, the Celtic cross, the mischievous leprechaun, and his pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, the banshee who wails mysteriously to signal a death, the Highland bagpipe, and the tartan. The tartan, it's like that, looks like flannel, kind of like plaid looking, almost kind of. Some elements of Celtic tradition and vocabulary have been incorporated into modern Western culture so thoroughly that the Celtic origins of certain words and customs are not readily known. For instance, many words have come into English from the Irish language, which is sometimes referred to outside of Ireland as Gaelic. For example, the words phony and smithereens have Irish origins. For many people, Celtic culture really means Irish culture. Irish culture has, of course, been spread around the globe by the Irish diaspora. The many millions of people who trace their descent to the island of Ireland, lots of people who find themselves fascinated by Irish culture do not have Irish heritage. They just like Irish music and dancing. Think of the enormous success of the Irish dancing show Riverdance or the popularity of singers such as Enya. Irish writers have all... Okay, I don't know. I don't have to read this entire thing, but... Yeah, so you can see these Celtic-speaking people. Yeah. Oh, so I think that was the initial version of how they. What the heck? Yeah, that. Hold on. Okay, so there's. Hold on. I've got it. Okay, so the Kurgan hypothesis, also known as the Kurgan theory, the Kurgan model, or the step theory, is the most widely accepted proposal to identify the Proto-Indo-European homeland from which the Indo-European languages spread out throughout Europe and parts of Asia. It postulates that the people of a Kurgan culture in the Pontic steppe, north of the Black Sea, were the most likely speakers of the Proto-Indo-European language. The term is derived from the Russian Kurgan, meaning tumulus, or burial mound. The step theory was first formulated by Otto Schrader and V. Gordon Child. Then system... Okay, so what... I don't know. So, let me see this picture. So this is the Kurgan. Where's the steppes? I don't even know where that is. Vedic culture, Iranians. Overview. Okay, when it was first proposed in 1956, The Prehistory of Eastern Europe, Part 1, Gimbuta's contribution to the search for Indo-European origins was an interdisciplinary synthesis of archaeology and linguistics. The Kurgan model, or Indo-European origins, identifies the Pontic-Caspian steppe as the Proto-Indo-European Urheimat, and a variety of late PIE dialects are assumed to have been spoken across this region. According to this model, the Kurgan culture... Well, you get the idea. So that's one of the theories. And then this is another one, the Anatolian hypothesis, also known as Anatolian theory, suggests that the speakers of Proto-Indo-European... Oh, that's what pi is. Lived in Anatolia during the Neolithic era. It associates the distribution of historical Indo-European languages with the expansion during the Neolithic revolution of the 7th and 6th millennia BC. I don't know. I guess I just don't really care that much about arguing about where they came from necessarily. I'm just like, we know they were there. We know they were a people. many different tribes, yes, but they did unite. Like they had meetings, like the Druids would have meetings where different tribes would all get together and they would discuss stuff. They tried to work together. I mean, sometimes they fought each other. I mean, I saw, it was like those Kings and Generals, that YouTube channel. There was one instance where there was like one group of Celts. It's like kind of in Central Europe above Italy, where they were fighting with another group of Celts. And one of them asked the Germans for help, because you got the Germanic tribes right next to them over there. And they came in, and I guess they helped fight. They did help them fight those Celts, but then they like wouldn't leave and sort of hung out and started like messing with the people they were supposed to be there to help in the first place. So I don't know. Again, this is like a long chunk of history, a big chunk of history that a lot of stuff happened. I'm so horrible. Okay, I'm going to X out of some of these. There's way too many. Okay, and then just randomly we've got something pulled up about Lunarsad. I wanted to get into like their sort of their religion and their beliefs and that sort of stuff. At Lunarsad, we see the fields of corn being cut, and for some, this is the true time of the festival. I think it's supposed to be like November 1st, but the Celtic day began at sundown and ended at sunrise, or not ended at it went from sundown to sundown, as opposed to with the Romans, it was from sunrise to sunrise, their measurement of a day, which is why Halloween was the night before, because it began at sundown. If that makes sense. In the fields, John Barleycorn, who laid with the lady in the woods at Beltane, has grown old and now stands bent and bearded with a crocked cane. He looks to the sun as he has changed from green to gold, and he known that his time has come. His life will feed the people. Okay. Deeper into Lunarsad, also known as Lammas or First Harvest, the name of this festival as Lunarsad is Irish Gaelic for commemoration of Lugh. Am I saying that wrong? Lugh. Shit. Lugh? Is it Lugh? Like Lugh. Some authors give the meaning as marriage, gathering, or feast in the name of Lugh. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. The meaning remains basically the same. Lugh is the deity of Lunarsad, and there is a feast. Although Lugh gives his name to this festival, it is also associated with Lugh's foster mother, Tailtiu, who is said to have cleared the way for the introduction of agriculture in Ireland, thus linking Lunarsad to the land of the harvest. The modern Irish Gaelic name for the month of August is Lunasa. In Scottish Gaelic, Lunasa means the 1st of August. And this isn't the Halloween one, by the way. Sorry. I just brought that up. But it's a different Sabbath, different holiday. One of several historic sources for the 4 Celtic fire festivals, Imbolc, Beltane, Lunarsad, and Samhain. Gotta say it right. I'm probably mispronouncing everything. Is the early medieval Irish tale of, and Samhain, that's Halloween, basically. The Tochmark Empire, the wooing of Emer, which is part of the Ulster cycle. In the form we know it today, it was written in the 10th or 11th century CE, but it is safe to assume that this tale, like so many others, contains a much older nucleus. The tale narrates how the hero, Cuchulainn, is courting Emer. He receives several tasks to fulfill, one of them being that he must go without sleep for 1 year. As Emer utters her challenge, she names the 4 major points of the Irish Celtic year, as they are also mentioned in other Irish sources. Doing this, she does not use the solar festivals, nor Christian ones, which were certainly well known and established by the 10th century. Instead, Emer chooses the first days of each season. One of these days is Lunarsad, marking the beginning of fall. It takes place on the 1st of August, a date internationally agreed upon, or on the day of the full moon next to this date, if you want to celebrate when the ancient Celts probably did. Since the Celtic day started with sunset, the celebration takes place on the evening before the calendaric date. Lunarsad marks the beginning of the noticeable descent of the sun into the darkness of winter. From the connection between the earth, female principle, and the sun, male principle, the marriage of the sky father, sun god, with the earth mother, we celebrated at Beltane, emerged the fruits of the first harvest of the year. Lunarsad is a time of joy about the first fruits. It is also a time of tension because the dark days of winter are coming nearer, and most of the harvest is not brought in and stored away yet. The god of the harvest is the green man, also known as John Barleycorn. Oh, okay. He sacrifices himself every year in order to enable human life on Earth. In some areas, his death is mourned with wreaths decorated with poppies or cornflowers. The grain is cut, part of it goes into bread and nutrition, and another part is stored away and used as seeds next spring to create new life. Looking at that, thoughts about sacrifice, transformation, death, and rebirth are also a part of Lughnasadh. And it starts talking about Lughnasadh rituals. The ritual cutting of the first grain and an offering thereof, possibly the making of a first meal and the ritual eating of it, as well as dancing, fires are mentioned, but fire or light do not play such a prominent role as with the other fire festivals. This is probably because August is a warm month in most of Europe, with still long daylight hours where no fire is needed. Lughnasadh celebrations are reported from Ireland, Isle of Man, Scotland, Wales, and Cornwall. Another name used for Lughnasadh is Lammas, from the Old Anglo-Saxon Hlaf Mass, loaf mass. Mass where the first loaf of bread is consecrated, which developed into the later medieval English and Scottish Lammas. As such, it is first mentioned in Old Anglo-Saxon chronicles as early as 921 CE as Feast of the First Fruits. War month! As such, it is first mentioned in Old Anglo-Saxon. Why do I keep saying that? Anglo-Saxon. I keep wanting to say Saxon for sure. Chronicles as early as 921 CE. Oh, I already read that. Begin the harvest was a natural occasion to celebrate and to give thanks to the divine for its gifts. In Bavarian tradition, the most important festival in August is the Ascension of Mary on the 15th of August. On this day, numerous processions through the villages and along the fields are held. During those processions, decorated bundles of herbs consisting of up to 77 different herbs are carried along on wooden sticks. These herbs are specially consecrated and stored away then. They are used for ritual incense burning later in the year, for example, during the rough nights, the night of the winter solstice. An older name for this festival is Maria Crowderway, meaning Day of Mary and Consecration of Herbs. The beginning of fall was marked by the Day of St. Bartholomew on August 24th. The original Lughnasadh customs have obviously shifted to August 15th and additionally into numerous local and regional harvest celebrations. Lughnasadh is therefore only one of the 8 Celtic festivals which did not survive in Bavaria as a compact celebration on or near the original date, August 1st. Harvest celebrations are instead dispersed over all of August. This might have to do with the geographical situation of Bavaria, where August tends to be a rather warm month, and harvest and fall are a bit later than elsewhere. Lughnasadh symbols? The deities of Lughnasadh are Danu. Yeah, because the Danube River, it's kind of interesting. It's like they have so many gods and a lot of them are connected to actual physical locations. So I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. Like I think she's supposed to be connected with that river. The mother of gods and men, Lugh, and patron of scholars, craftsmen, warriors, and magicians. Lugh is also known as Lugh Samuel Danish, the many-skilled, and Lugh Lam. I hate that I'm probably butchering all these words, these names. Lamhfada, Lamhfada. Lugh with the long arm. It is disputed among authors whether this refers to Lugh's magical spear or to the rays of the sun. Lugh seems to have been worshipped like his Greek and Roman correspondences, Hermes and Mercury, mostly on elevations, hills, or mountaintops. The plant of Lughnasadh is any form of grain or corn, in a wider sense, every fruit of field and garden. The meaning of Lughnasadh on the inner planes is the start of the harvest of the fruits that we have sown in spring, which things or projects are reaping in us in the moment. What would we like to finish? What to start anew? Do we have the insight that to every harvest there is a necessity of preparation? The essence of Lughnasadh is the joy of life under the knowledge that darker times are moving in. We take in the warming rays of the sun and store their power for the times coming. At the time we celebrate the next festival, Alban Elfid, it will be fall and the warm summer days will already be a memory. Of course, Lughnasadh is a very good time to express gratitude to the gods and the earth spirits for their blessings and gifts that we are now receiving. In times of microwave and frozen pizza, it may seem anachronistic to thank for the harvest. Okay, sorry, just random thought I wanted to throw out there. One of the things I read was that Disputes were settled using crows. I don't really understand how or why, but I just wanted to say that. Many of our modern foodstuffs make it hard to still recognize the waving grain on the field in them. Okay, I'm bored. Crap. Oh God, how long have I been? Oh my God, it's already been an hour. Okay, so there's something called the Coligny calendar. It's a bronze plaque with an inscribed calendar made in Roman Gaul in the 2nd century CE that lays out a 5-year cycle of a lunisolar calendar each year with 12 lunar months. Here's an overview of the reassembled. Oh, see, that's writing. That's writing. But, I mean, yeah, okay, I guess they just didn't have as much writing as others. But, okay. Stop it. It lays out a 5-year cycle of lunisolar, 12 lunar. An intercalary month is inserted before each 2.5 years. The lunar phase is tracked with exceptional precision, adjusted when necessary by a variable month. And the calendar uses the 19-year Metonic cycle to keep track of the solar year. It is the most important evidence for the reconstruction of ancient Celtic calendar. It was found in 1897 in France, in Coligny, Ain, near Lyon. So sorry. Along with broken pieces of bronze statue of a life-size naked male holding a spear, likely Roman Mars or Romano-Celtic Lugus, which is probably, yeah, they associate him with, is that him? Where's the spear? It was engraved on a bronze tablet preserved in 73 fragments that was originally 1.48 meters, written in Latin inscriptional capitals and numerals, but terms are in the Gaulish language. Based in the style of lettering and the accompanying statue, the bronze plaque probably dates to the end of the 2nd century, although the copying errors indicate the calendar itself is much older. It is now held at the Gallo-Roman Museum of Lyon-Fourvière. 8 small fragments of a similar calendar were found at the double shrine of Villards de Heria. It does not have the holes of the peg calendar that the Coligny calendar does, but otherwise the same notations. It is now held in the Musée d'Archéologie de, I can't do French, damn it. List of months. The 12 lunar year months. Simonios, Dumanios, Riveros, Anagantios, Agronios, Cutios. Okay, I'm not going to read all of them. Those are the months. The lunar month, solar year. They had a calendar. It's called the Coligny calendar. It's like Coligny. Sample month. Okay. All right. Got through that. Oh yeah, the cult of the severed heads. So they revered severed heads. They really liked severed heads. The Celts. Head hunting is a proof of prowess at the veneration of the head as the seat of the soul and the source of spiritual potency are both far older than the dawn of the historical period. In Europe, there is fairly clear evidence for them as far back as Mesolithic times. They were therefore part of the European heritage long before the Celts emerged as a distinct cultural entity, but here, as in so many other instances, what the Celts borrowed or inherited from others, they soon made peculiarly their own. The veneration of the head became a central element of their ideology, a deep-set preoccupation which lasted from the birth of the Celtic peoples to their final conquest. One which left its imprint ubiquitously on their art and their mythology. The archaeological and artistic evidence for the head cult among the Celts is too extensive to catalog briefly. For example, at the Celto-Ligurian sanctuary of Entremont in southern Gaul, 15 male skulls were found, several of them still bearing the marks of the spikes with which they had been fixed for display. And at Bredon Hill in Gloucestershire, England, a row of skulls uncovered near the entrance seemed to have fallen from above the gate of the fort. At Entremont, there were examples of severed heads and sculpted on blocks of stone. Oh, so many hard words. Classical authors confirm the archaeological testimony. According to Posidonius, as reported by Diodorus, Siculus, and Strabo, the Celts returned from battle with the heads of their defeated enemies hanging from the necks of their horses. I haven't even talked about, human sacrifice, which is fine. It was probably not very, it probably wasn't as common as, the Romans might have tried to make it seem. Albert Spear says, let's be honest, who doesn't enjoy a good freshly severed head now and then? I know, right? I mean, I'm sure they They were lovely to have around. I don't know. The heads of their most distinguished opponents they embalmed in cedar oil and stored carefully in a chest to be displayed proudly to their visitors. And in some instances, they used the skull of a distinguished enemy as a vessel for sacred libations. They said they drank out of the skull. These and other similar references are supported by the insular Celtic literatures where the return of the hero carrying the heads of his foes. I should have turned my heater off. His foes as trophies in commonplace. Cormac's glossary, which dates from around 900 CE, defines the term, I can't say it, Mesrad Make, the nut harvest of Macha, the war goddess, as the heads of men after they have been cut down. But the cult of the head went far beyond the pursuit of martial glory. The head was not only a prized heroic trophy, but also a profoundly religious symbol, sometimes evidently representative of a deity and generally suggestive of supernatural wisdom and power. It was a source of prosperity, fertility, and healing, as well as an apotropaic agent to ward off evil from the individual and from the community as a whole. Severed heads are often associated with sacred wells, themselves instruments of healing in the archaeological record. I'm just going to mention another random thing just because I'm running out of time. They like to throw they would throw treasures in lakes, and then when Romans came in, they would come and drain the lakes and take all the shit they put in there. Yeah, sorry, I just have to blurt out things when I remember them randomly, but okay. This association was carried over into the legends of the Christian saints. There are many instances in the literature of heads continuing to live, speaking, directing, entertaining, long after they have been separated from the body. Perhaps the most striking example is that of Bendigeidfran, Bran the Blessed, whose head presided over and I think the word Bran means crow, whose head presided over the other world and protected the island of Britain since its burial at the White Mount in London. Indeed, so widespread and so persistent is the image of the head and its various aspects of the Anaras has seen fit to describe it as the most typical Celtic religious symbol. All right, cool, moving on. Here's something I had pulled up, Celtic Druids. It's a book that they have on the Internet Archive. I don't really know why I pulled it up. I can't read a whole book here right now. Stonehenge. Again with Stonehenge. See, that's the thing. It's I don't know. I don't think that's accurate. They worshipped in the oak groves. Okay, moving on. Oh, there's that calendar again. Celtic languages. You know what? I'm sick of talking. Let's watch a video. Here's one on Vercingetorix. He's a very important character. Yeah. He was important. I'll just play it.
Great men are born.
We can't watch the whole thing. It's 20 minutes long.
Born from fire. They are heated in it, beaten down to work the slag from the iron, and forged into swords, able to carve a path through history. When one sword meets another, there is a clash, a spark.
Okay, so they were really expert metallurgists, the Celts. So we discussed this on Telegram a little bit already, but I really don't think that their swords were bending. And it was one of the stories that one of the Romans told about them was that their swords were only good for one strike, and then they bent when they had to put it on the ground. And by the way, the guy who said that was saying that over 100 years after what he was describing. So he wasn't actually there. I just don't think that was actually happening. It was probably a made up to explain the tombs that they found where they had these bent swords with the bodies in there. And they did that for some ritualistic reason. I mean, it's possible that some of them had shitty swords, but like I said, they were expert metallurgists. So just probably not.
And for a moment, as these two forces strive against each other, awaiting the victory granted by Lug, the whole course of time stands in the balance. And for a brief moment, in 52 BC, the future of Europe and the Gallic people stood in the balance. On one side, Caesar. On the other, Vercingetorix. If you'd like to support the channel, please check possible that this attempt at a grand power play may have been in response to the invasion of Julius Caesar in 58 BC, but the exact time is unknown. Yet what is clear is that he had a great national ambition, and this was something that he would pass on to his son. Vercingetorix's name means Great Warrior King.
Hold on. So he's saying Vercingetorix. The other guy said Vercingetorix, so whatever.
And he was most certainly raised to be just that. While we don't know any details about his childhood, we know from his later life that he was trained in leadership, politics, and military tactics, so much so that he may have been the first military leader in Europe to use scorched earth tactics. He must also have been intensely charismatic, for he not only was able to...
They weren't very well armored, the Celts. Like, they had armor, and they might have even invented the first early version of what became chainmail, but for whatever reason, only certain higher-up guys had the actual armor. It's just kind of unfortunate. I mean, I wish they could have won some. I mean, I don't know. It was just kind of sad that they got defeated by Rome.
Win the support among his own tribe.
They're really good fighters.
But to gain the support of most other tribes in Gaul in only a few short months. Depictions of him on coins show him as handsome and youthful. He was only 30 years old when he came face to face with the infamous Julius Caesar. He grew up in Gergovia, the tribal capital of the Arverni, a well-organized town situated on a plateau and defended by great stone walls. It and other towns like it throughout Gaul were the motivation behind Caesar's drive for conquest. With towns and productive agriculture and skilled trades and wealth, and he not only desired Gaul's wealth, he needed it.
So sorry.
He was buried in debts, and his invasion of Gaul under false pretenses was perhaps primarily motivated by his need for gold. Gaul was a wealthy and well-organized society by 58 BC. They had expert craftsmen who exported goods to the Mediterranean.
They're called torques, the neck choker things.
Roads that connected their territories. They were well-fed and ate more nutritiously than Romans, and they were developing their own artistic and architectural styles, influenced by the Mediterranean, but not identical to it. They were not primitive peoples, but had a highly sophisticated lifestyle and economy, largely based on agriculture, which was not less technologically advanced than Roman agriculture at this time. Their weakness was political disunity, and it was along these fault lines that Caesar pushed in and found so much success. It isn't known what Vercingetorix was doing in the initial period of Roman invasion, but it might have been that, like many Gauls, they were not sure what to think. Caesar was a crafty statesman and military leader, and his main road through Gaul was carved along tribal fault lines. They wormed their way into every dispute, made promises whatever side suited them, and who would then be obliged to give loyalty to Caesar. Tribal politics, though possessing various positive qualities, was unable to resist this type of maneuvering, which would play out again and again through the history of warfare. In a few short years, nearly all of Gaul was under the power of Caesar.
That's from the show Rome. I started watching
Although there were many battles between Caesar and various individual Gaulish tribes, the desire for political unity was slow to develop. But by 54 BC, the situation had begun to change. The nobility was often the most reluctant to resist the Roman power, because they also had the possibility to gain from it. Many of them were being bought off, selling out their people for wine, status, or wealth. Yet the common people were becoming infuriated. Viking
says, that's one of my favorite HBO series. Okay, so I finally made it through the first episode. It's so hard. Not that it's good. It's a good show. I don't know why I get distracted and I want to look at my phone and stuff. Probably 2 after Deadwood. Oh, probably 2. I need to watch Deadwood. My sister likes that show a lot. But yeah, I finally finished the first episode and started the second episode of Rome. I was hoping there would be some more Celtic sort of stuff in it. I've seen a couple things. It starts right off showing him. He's about to get executed. I think they slit his throat. Vercingetorix. I watched it 15 years ago. No cell phones. Yeah, I always pause it because I'm like, okay, I'm getting distracted and looking at stuff, and then I'll push play later when I get back to it. But it took me like a week to watch the first episode. I have trouble watching TV.
The Eburones, a Belgic tribe, were the first to rebel when Caesar, just back from his second British expedition, decided to stay the winter in their territory and become a massive drain on their already dwindling food supplies due to a drought. The rebellion failed and was followed by a massive genocide that saw every village burnt and all their food destroyed. Caesar would return 2 years later to try and wipe out those who had survived his first attempt and had begun to rebuild.
Shows now.
Actions like this fueled rage through Gaul and helped build the idea of uniting in order to resist. By 52 BC, when Caesar was raising troops in Cisalpine Gaul, the Carnutes launched a surprise uprising, initiating a massive purge of all Roman settlers and traders that they could find in their lands. Vercingetorix was eager to join them in their efforts, and he quickly called up his dependents. Yet his own actions proved unpopular with the rest of the Arverni elite, including his own uncle, when Vercingetorix insisted on participating in the uprising against Caesar. The oligarchs of the Arverni expelled him from their territory. Though Vercingetorix's decision to rise up against Rome was not popular with the elite or his uncle, it proved to be extremely popular with average people.
I think he was
began to
like
flock to him to join his army.
He was able to unite
them. In little
them.
time, he had won over to his cause a massive force, and with this army he turned and marched not on the Romans, but on Gargovia. He took the city, and his supporters declared him king of the Arverni. Now in full command of his people, Vercingetorix hastily sent word to those tribes who he thought he could count on: the Senones, the Parisi, the Pictones, the Caduri, the Torones, the Auterci, the Lemovice, and all the rest of the Atlantic-dwelling Gauls. He understood what it would take to gain victory over Caesar, and he demanded hostages, troops, and likely a recognition of his position as what the Irish would have called High King. He told them that this was their best and only chance to free Gaul from foreign occupation and to stop the destruction of their peoples and way of life. The hostages, troops, and pledges all came in. There was a swelling feeling across Gaul that this man was their hope, though exactly how and why his leadership was so swiftly accepted by so many is not clearly understood from the surviving information.
Maybe he was charming.
It is possible that secret meetings were taking place before this that had singled out Vercingetorix as their most capable leader.
I haven't even talked about the pigs.
Possible that the Druids played a role, pushing tribal leaders to accept and aid him. Weapons, troops.
So the pigs are in Scotland, like northern Scotland. That's where they are. And they're the ones that would paint themselves. They're the painted ones. Sorry, that's not what this is talking about at all. But
forces poured into
so many things to cover
across Gaul, and he oversaw the training of the man himself, especially the cavalry. He attempted to discipline them and verse them in mass battlefield tactics, but he was operating on little time. Though some of his men were likely hardened veteran warriors, many more would have been primarily farmers or craftsmen. They were to stand against Caesar's highly experienced Roman legions, some of the best equipped and trained soldiers anywhere in the world. Yet Vercingetorix was also not without skilled men under his command. One of these was Lucterius of the Cadurci, whom the king would entrust a great military force to, and whose trust was not misplaced, for he would prove both cunning and loyal to the end. Learning of these developments, Caesar moved north as quickly as he could, stopping temporarily in the territory of the Helvii. High mountains stood between the Helvii and the Arverni territory, and it was already winter, with heavy snow. But Caesar managed to force his way through the pass, mobilizing his soldiers to dig the entire way. Their appearance shocked the Arverni, who sent desperate word to Vercingetorix to come and help them. Yet the Romans marched instead to the territories of the Bituriges and seized a number of towns, fighting small engagements with forces of Vercingetorix, which had resulted in their defeat. It was then that Vercingetorix employed a scorched earth tactic. Rather than engaging directly, they burned down all the villages and secured all the grain with the army. However, apparently due to the pleading of the Bituriges, Vercingetorix allowed one place to stand against his better judgment, Avaricum. It was, of course, here that the Romans next targeted. The defenders of Avaricum held out for weeks against the Romans, who were slowly being starved to death by Vercingetorix. The king's army would prevent supplies from reaching Caesar, disrupt foraging attempts, and would set the very countryside aflame. Yet driven by hunger and the knowledge that food awaited them on the other side of the walls, after a hard fight, the Romans were finally able to overcome the walls of Avaricum and kill everyone within, some 40,000 people.
Long story short, he came closer than a lot of them to uniting, and, fending off the Romans, but I guess in the end it didn't quite.
By all the tribes of Gaul in Bibracte, modern-day Autun in Burgundy, the capital of Rome's former allies, the Aedui. Only the Treveri, Remi, and Lingones do not attend, as they were the only remaining Roman allies. The Council of Tribes declared Vercingetorix the commander of the united Gallic armies. After obtaining hostages from all the participating Gallic tribes and 15,000 horses, he dispatches troops for the liberation of several tribes still in the grips of the Romans. Meanwhile, Caesar went to the Lingones and recruited large numbers of Germanic mercenaries before heading to
damn
Gallia
Germanic
and Narbonensis.
mercenaries.
It was here that Vercingetorix finally decided to give open battle to the Romans. The battle commander of the united Gallic army
I think the Romans
had now
are cool
assembled
too,
a massive
I don't
cavalry
know.
force. Caesar put that number at 15,000, large enough for Vercingetorix to feel confident in ordering a direct cavalry charge on Caesar's
I feel
forces,
bad for the Celts.
whom he believed would be hindered as they were on the march and laden with baggage. However, the Roman legions, especially those who had been fighting under Julius Caesar for years in Gaul, were very experienced, and they knew just how to respond.
Yeah, they're very,
The
very
cavalry
organized.
attack
Like, the way
resulted
they fought.
in a large loss for Vercingetorix's forces. Disoriented and demoralized from the loss,
Better-
Vercingetorix moved his forces to the defensive position of nearby Alesia.
Better
Caesar
armored.
quickly pursued and made camp outside the hill fort on the next day. Though he still had superior numbers, Vercingetorix knew that in a direct confrontation, the superior equipment and training of the Romans would be difficult to overcome. Further, they had limited
Superior
supplies
training.
to support the army under siege. For these reasons, he ordered all the remaining cavalry to return to their tribes and assemble all the forces that could be brought to bear to relieve the siege and crush Caesar at the same time, like steel between the hammer and the anvil. Had he not been dealing with one of the greatest military generals in history, there is little doubt that this plan would have resulted in victory for the Gauls. As the riders raced out from Alesia, Vercingetorix prepared to wait, ordering a strict rationing of the available food and having the old, sick, women and children leave. So that Vercingetorix and his army could not escape, Caesar built up a large defensive ditch and fence. Yet when he learned that a massive relief army was forming that would be able to hit him from behind, he had a novel idea. He ended up building a donut-shaped defense, where the Romans had closed in Alesia and had also walled out the relief army. It was an enormous task of labor for his
It's like a
troops,
famous one.
and only their immense experience in building camp fortifications, as well as their strict discipline, enabled them to pull it off before the arrival of the Gallic forces. All the while, there were intense clashes taking place between the Romans and the Gallic army trapped in Alesia. Vercingetorix tested the Roman defenses daily, looking for weak points in order to break through, and this frenzy of attack accelerated when the encircled warriors saw the massive relief army on the horizon. Possibly between 200,000 and 300,000 brave Gauls had assembled to assist Vercingetorix, and they fought ferociously to break through the fortifications of Caesar. But they were not being led by the clever command of Vercingetorix, nor did the king have any way to communicate with the relief army. Again, the Gauls find themselves divided, just as Caesar had managed to do for years. After days of fighting, a final great push is made to break through the defenses. Vercingetorix leads his men, attacking anywhere along the fortifications that seem weakened, and at the same time the relief forces attack the outer defenses. Had they succeeded in breaking through, the Roman forces would have been swept away, but Caesar, seeing the danger, himself charged into battle, rallying his troops and making a last desperate push. The relief army then came under attack from behind by a Roman sally. Exhausted from their efforts and smashed by Caesar's assault, they break and retreat, but are intercepted by the Germanic cavalry. The battle turns into a slaughter. Perhaps over 100,000 Gauls are killed that day.
Oh,
Seeing
geez.
this terrible result, Vercingetorix recognizes with great sorrow that he has been defeated.
Oh,
Not wanting to
that's
have his-
famous. That's called the Dying Gaul, and it was, I believe, it was made by Romans or I can't remember. Whatever. But the way it was made, you could tell that they respected the Gauls, like as being ferocious, hardcore fighters. That's just famous. It's called the Dying Gaul. Moving on.
His men or his people suffer needlessly, knowing the battle had already been decided.
Okay, and he is not wearing clothes. You'll notice there. I don't think they all fought naked. Like they had their shields, they had their helmets. I don't know. I heard it was just one specific tribe that was sort of known for that. They didn't all fight naked.
offered himself up to his nobles, who decided the best course was to surrender to Caesar and hand over their king.
The
next morning they rode out.
They were
cast their
less
weapons
dressed
down at the feet
than
of
the
Caesar.
Romans, we'll say that.
Vercingetorix was taken as prisoner and kept as such for 5 years before the triumph for Caesar through Rome, after which he was strangled to death.
Strangled. Sorry. That's how they would do it. They would strangle them, not slit us up.
Or a few misplaced sword strikes, Vercingetorix might well have been the true High King of Gaul, having united the tribes and defeated the invaders who had come so close to complete conquest. Yet it was not to be.
Close
Many
but
Gauls
no
were
cigar.
killed, many enslaved, but there were those who carried on the fight. Lucterius, one of Vercingetorix's chosen generals, still with part of his army intact, continued the struggle against Rome for a year longer, engaging in hit-and-run tactics. Eventually losing his base of power in Gaul, he and his men disappeared into German territory, never to be seen again.
Viking says, that was probably 10% of their population, if not more. Yeah.
Just like Lucterius ended up fleeing Gaul at this time, likely it was true of many other displaced nobles who had fought against Rome, and now found themselves on the outside, and some may well have found themselves in Britain, Ireland, and other Germanic regions. But the memory of brave men, of great men, like Vercingetorix, whether they succeeded or whether they failed,
that was Vercingetorix.
Even now, over 2,000 years later. I hope you found this video interesting. If you did, please like, subscribe, and check out our Patreon page.
Okay. Oh God, I just have so many open. Let's just X out. Just talking about languages. I'm just gonna X out that too. Luke, we already kind of went over that. Ancient Druids of Wales. Druids, the ancient priests of Britain and Ireland, have long intrigued and kindled the imagination of large popular audiences. The stereotypical image of the white-robed wise man carrying perhaps a golden sickle and mistletoe or clasping a white staff remains strong with us today, the outcome of many centuries of thinking and invention. Yet what evidence do we have for these powerful but elusive figures? The earliest mention of Druids comes during the 1st century BC, referring to Druidae in Gaul, France, and Britain, who were wise men, observers of natural phenomena, and moral philosophers. Similar to the Druids were the bards, singers and poets, and diviners. Bards were like kind of a big deal. They were like, I don't know, poets were high up on the social ladder, who interpreted sacrifices in order to foretell the future. Druids and bards were common in medieval Welsh and Irish texts, probably giving account of much earlier oral tradition passed on by word of mouth. Never mind. Google says Gaul had a population of 5 million. Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there were actually quite a lot of them. And often it was the case they were outnumbering the Romans, but the Romans just, I don't know. Maybe I should do a thing on that sometime. But I don't know how they went from getting their asses kicked to like all of a sudden like being the ass kickers. But something to do with their being really well trained and really organized, where they were winning even when they were heavily outnumbered in many cases. Okay, so back to the Druids. Word of mouth. The visual appearance of Druids that they wore, people seem to believe that they wore like this white like long white kind of flowing thing. What they wore and what possessions they owned is difficult to clarify. There are few illustrations or inscriptions of the time, whilst archaeology rarely provides certain answers. A Druidic ceremony described by Pliny in his Natural History describes a white-robed Druid climbing an oak tree to cut down mistletoe with a golden sickle. I can't say that. In Wales, the roles and privileges of bards related to laws set down by Hywel Dda in the 10th century. Oh my God. In the 10th century AD, during the 18th century, Druids came to be seen as the ancestors of the bards, the praise poets, musicians, and genealogists who flourished in Welsh medieval society. Human sacrifice. What is this? Okay. A revival of interest in Druids began during the Renaissance, 14th to 16th centuries, when translations of classical Greek and Roman texts became widely available. A number of sources describe the Druids as performing human sacrifice. Places of worship were described as isolated wooded groves, oak groves, and near sacred pools and lakes. According to one source, the Druidic groves on Mona had the blood of prisoners drenched upon their altars. So I think Mona is an island just off the coast of Wales, and that was like their main headquarters, the Druids. Here we go with Stonehenge again. Some accounts suggested that the stone circles at Avebury and Stonehenge had been Druidic temples. Similarly, a number of megalithic monuments on Anglesey were thought, that is Mona, Anglesey, were thought to be the temples and sacrificial altars of the Druids. However, with advances in archaeological understanding during the 19th century, it became clear these monuments were built over 4,000 years ago. Okay, so they're too old. Long before the appearance of Druids. Nevertheless, modern Druids and bards continue to meet within stone circles today. Yeah, like the neo-pagans of the now times, they do stuff that isn't necessarily accurate for some reason. All right, moving on. Celtic rituals of the Iron Age. Archaeology does, however, provide evidence for the religious expression of Celtic Iron Age people. The tradition of offering gifts to the gods is well illustrated at the site of Lyn Serig Bach on Anglesey. Here, between 300 BC and AD 100, chariots, weapons, tools, and decorated metalwork items were cast from a causeway or island into a small lake. I kind of want to maybe for a second, since it just mentioned it, words that the Romans borrowed from Celtic. I just wanted to talk about the chariot for a second. Borrowed from Celtic tell us that the Romans were very struck by Celtic customs with regard to war and religion. The Romans borrowed a Celtic word for javelin, geisa, and another for chariot, esidum. They borrowed words for bard and druid, and we still use those words in English today. Hold on, I wanted to find... Damn it, I swear at some point she was describing how they fought on the chariot. It was actually pretty effective, like, in the earlier days. Okay, whatever. Just never mind. In this prehistoric world, the power of the pagan Celtic gods was keenly felt, ever present and intermingled with everyday life. Tacitus, who wrote the Roman conquest of Anglesey. On the beach stood the adverse array of Britons, a serried mass of arms and men, with women fitting between the ranks, in the style of Furies, in robes of deathly black and with disheveled hair. They brandished their torches. I don't know if they wore black though. This might be might not be correct. Brandished their torches while a circle of Druids, lifting their hands to heaven and showering imprecations, struck the troops with such an awe at the extraordinary spectacle that as though their limbs were paralyzed, they exposed their bodies to wounds without an attempt at movement. Then, reassured by their general and inciting each other never to flinch before a band of females and fanatics, they charged behind the standards, cut down all who meet them, and enveloped the enemy in his own flames. The next step was to install a garrison among the conquered population and to demolish the groves consecrated to their savage cults, for they considered it a pious duty to slake the altars with captive blood and to consult their deities by means of human entrails. Yeah, so when the Celts defeated people, people who they might have done sort of a sacrifice to the gods that way by the defeated people, or prisoners, or I don't know. They found stuff that made it look like they sacrificed those people that they had defeated. The Burning Man, remember that? Or what's it called? The Wicker Man? That might not actually have been a thing. I don't know. There's so much that we're not sure about. There's a lot that could have been sort of made up, but, it was supposed to be like a giant wicker man, remember Nicolas Cage? The bees, not the bees. But I don't know if that actually was a thing they actually did. Because, a lot of stuff was written by the Romans about them that there's doubt. From what I've read, people have expressed doubt that the Wicker Man was actually a thing. Oh, God. I don't know. Stories of the Druids abound, but what is the hard archaeological evidence? A Druid was a Celtic ritual specialist from Britain, Ireland, Gaul, and other parts of Europe and Galatia during the Iron Age and possibly earlier in the Bronze Age. Very little is known about the ancient Druids, as they did not have a written language and records. Anti-Celtic bias. Yes, see, okay. Roman records and Druids in history. There it is. That's what I was just talking about. The earliest surviving literary evidence of Druids comes from the classical world of Greece and Rome. Greco-Roman authors often portray Celtic peoples as uncivilized savages due to lack of technological development and depicted Rome as a civilizing force. The oldest text mentioning Druids comes from Julius Caesar in 50 BC in Book 6 of Commentary on the Gallic War. He says that the Druids sacrifice animals and people by burning them inside a wicker man, despite no actual evidence of this. Other than a single sentence in Caesar's book, such reports are likely anti-Celtic propaganda used to transmit negative information, adding to the image of Celtic people being savages in the eyes of the Greco-Roman citizens. But anyway, that's supposed to be what that looked like a big fake wicker guy that they shoved a bunch of people into and burned alive. I don't think it happened, though. Caesar also describes how Druids were concerned with divine worship and playing an essential role in Gaulish society, acting as both equites, a term meaning horsemen, which may equate to warrior, and judges. The text also states that Druids recognized the authority of a single leader who would rule until his death. Then a successor would be chosen either by a vote or combat, but usually the former. Druids also acted as teachers, training young men to become Druids. Druids and a few women, not very many, but a few. Druids, like numerous cultures, both prehistoric and modern, were fascinated by the movements of stars and other celestial bodies. This implies that they were still using Neolithic monuments, such as Stonehenge, to track different astronomical alignments. Okay, maybe they were using for that purpose. Okay, I don't know. Another Roman writer, Tacitus, also wrote poorly of the Druids after the Roman army came across a group on the Isle of Mona in Wales. He says that the Druids were hostile and fought against the Romans, which seems like a perfectly logical response to an invading force arriving on your shores. The Romans responded by cutting down their sacred groves, which the Druids used as a shrine. That's rude. Are there any Druid artifacts? There is very little evidence for Druids in the archaeological record. Archaeologist and historian Ronald Hutton once said that not one artifact or image has been unearthed that can undoubtedly be connected with the ancient Druid. Even the astral symbolism on late Iron Age swords and the Coligny calendar cannot be confidently linked with Druids. However, if they are Druid artifacts, then it is evidence that they were warriors, as Roman sources describe, even if it was just ritual combat. The Coligny calendar shows the Celtics were concerned with timekeeping and astrological movements. Evidence for human sacrifice. What the heck is that? Reconstruction of the head of Lindo Man. Despite the uncertainty of the archaeological record, some researchers have tried to match written accounts of the Druids to actual physical evidence. One such archaeologist is Anne Ross, who thinks that she has found evidence for human sacrifice in Celtic society, supporting Roman claims in the form of bog bodies, such as Lindo Man. Okay, I remember now. Yeah, I don't know. Bogs would really preserve bodies put into them, which is good, I guess, because we can look at them and like one that they found, he was like so well preserved. You could tell that he had like manicured fingernails, which means he had probably like an easy, he led like a kind of nice, comfortable life before being a human sacrifice. But some of the other stuff I read said that those bog bodies might not necessarily have come from Celts, and that a lot of people just like to put, it might not have been, I don't know. Roman sources say that the bog bodies are the remains of criminals, and their often violent death supports these claims. Many bog bodies show evidence of ritual killing by often having been stabbed, bludgeoned, and hanged. However, the evidence suggests that some bog bodies were not criminals, but offerings. Lindo Man, for example, had a good diet. Okay, this must be who I was just talking about. Far better than his contemporaries, and had well-groomed nails, indicating a lack of physical work and perhaps a pampered life. Such features suggest that these sacrifices were pre-chosen for sacrifice at an early age. Perhaps being a sacrifice to the gods was considered a great honor in these cultures. I'm thinking probably, yeah. I mean, Druid burials tell another side of the story. In 1988, a burial was excavated at Mill Hill near Deal, Kent, and was believed to be the grave of a Druid. The burial, known as the Deal Warrior, dates to the Iron Age around 200 to 150 BC. Grave goods included a sword and shield, and he was wearing a crown in the same style as ones worn by Romano-British priests several centuries later. The crown was too thin to have been much use for protection. It was made of bronze with a broad band around the head and a thin strip across the top of the head. The discovery led archaeologists to conclude that he might have been a Druid. The inclusion of high-status grave goods shows that Druids were important figures in pre-Roman Celtic society. The fact the later priests during the Roman occupation wore a similar style of headdress is evidence of continuity of belief and that Druid culture became incorporated into Romano-British society. A second Druid grave was unearthed in Colchester, Essex in 2008. The remains were cremated, possibly to release the Druid spirit, and were placed into a wood-lined chambered burial. As with the Deal Warrior, the site contained numerous grave goods. A cloak pinned with brooches, jet beads, divining rods for fortune-telling, a series of surgical instruments, iron and copper alloy scalpels, a surgical saw, hooks, needles, forceps, and probes, a strainer bowl with remnants of daisy tea, a board game carefully laid out. Okay. These objects were useful things to the Druid when he was alive, so they provide invaluable insights into the role played by Druids. The different method of processing the body shows either variation in religious practices in Celtic Britain or that the two individuals held different ranks and thus the burial practices were different. The surgical kits show that Druids were not as uncivilized and primitive as the Romans like to make out, as they mirror medical tools in other parts of the Roman Empire and show that Celts adopted Roman customs. It also shows the Druids acted as doctors performing surgeries and used herbal remedies, hence the daisy tea. Druids' roles in Celtic society. Druids held many roles in Celtic society. They were healers and doctors, as shown by the presence of surgical instruments in their grave. Druids also served as fortune tellers and astrologers, as suggested by objects such as divining rods and the Coligny calendar, as well as Roman sources. However, there was a darker side to Druids, as they engaged in human sacrifice, as evidenced by the bog bodies of Northern Europe and Roman sources, though the latter is highly biased. Druids were incredibly important, possibly even leading the Celts forward in a Roman-dominated future, as the advanced Roman-like surgical instruments suggest. An Iron Age British spoon, possibly for divination, linked to the Druids. Okay, we can X out. Druids and mistletoe, how they use the sacred plant. Some believe that the word Druid means the men of the oak trees. The oaks are among the tallest and strongest trees of the forests of Europe, has the hardest and most compact wood, and can easily live over 700 years, reaching 10 stories in height. Like the Greeks before them, the Druids recognized the oak as being sacred. The forest gods or tree deities of the Greeks were known as dryads. The word is also similar to the Gaelic word druid, which means wise man or sorcerer. In Sanskrit, the word dru means timber. The Druids would conduct their spiritual work deep in the groves of the oak trees of Britain. To them, the oak tree was a symbol of the supreme deity, and it was from the oak tree that the Druids would get their mistletoe. The Druids used mistletoe in their medicine. Isn't it poisonous, though? The archdruid would climb the oak trees and cut the mistletoe with a golden sickle. The mistletoe would be wrapped in white cloth for use later in their ceremonies, and great care was taken to ensure that it would never touch the ground. During the ceremony of cutting the mistletoe alert, sacrificed 2 white bulls underneath the oak tree. According to the Roman historian Pliny, the Druids considered anything that grew on the oak to have been sent from heaven, and that when mistletoe would grow on an oak tree, it meant that God had selected that tree. So it says they possess knowledge of medicine, especially the use of herbs, but also were able to perform surgery to some extent. The Druids who practiced medicine would have their own garden of herbs for treating their patients. There are theories that the Druids even possessed magical healing abilities, which utilized magnetism and made special magical brews with mistletoe that would operate on the astral plane to heal the sick. They believed that drinking the mistletoe would cure infertility and was an antidote to poisons. In the Druidic language, the word for mistletoe translated to all healing. I'm a little confused by that because we now know that it's poisonous. Oh yeah, mistletoe is actually poisonous to humans. Injections of mistletoe are used to treat cancer? Okay, this is confusing. There are over 1,300 different kinds of mistletoe. Currently, there are 20 varieties of mistletoe, which are considered endangered. It parasitizes a host, meaning it grows on other plants. Today, many believe that the act of kissing under a mistletoe will lead to marriage. Mistletoe is popular Christmas decoration. Okay. Oh, they operated like a mystery school. So, like their predecessors in in ancient Egypt and Greece, the Druids operated as a mystery school in that their knowledge was kept closely guarded and only revealed to their members after being initiated into the order. Once initiated, members would be taught the Druidic mysteries, which was not written but communicated orally. There are different theories on the origins of their knowledge, with some believing that it came from Phoenicians who had traveled to Britain in search of natural resources. The Druidic pantheon contains many Greek and Roman deities. They might have been... I know that they believed in reincarnation, and they might have. I don't know why. For some reason, I want to mention Pythagoras. I don't know why. I think I read something about something. Never mind. Forget that. The Druids were held in such high regard by the people of Britain that they were consulted for all important decisions, including warfare. The Druids wore white robes and had advanced knowledge of natural science, geography, theology, and astrology. The people who lived in Britain called their priests Gwyd, Gwyd. This evolved as they started having different levels of priests, so the higher level became known as Druid. Oh, Druid. While the secondary was Ovate. O-V-A-T-E. Both classes of priests were known as beard bards, which means teachers of wisdom. Eventually, they had three classes: the Druids, the Ovates, and the beard braint, or privileged bards. The Ovate was an honorary degree and required no special preparation except for the possession of an exceptional character and potential. They wore green and were beginners in the study of the Druidic mysteries, which limited access to knowledge. The young members of the Druids would be clean-shaven, while the older members wore long gray beards. I don't know. Many Gaelic... I'm not sure about the beards. It doesn't matter. Many Gaelic youth from continental Europe... Oh my God. From continental Europe would go to Britain to attend Druidic colleges, which offered a superior education. They would practice strict abstinence and only be admitted after a long probationary period and practice strict secrecy. The second degree were the bard, who wore blue. They were tasked with memorizing the extensive Druidic sacred poetry, which contains 20,000 verses. They were often musicians who played the harp and would tutor the Ovate. The third degree were the Druids, who attended to the religious matters of the people. These were graduates of the bards who had attained full initiation, and they would wear white, which symbolized the sun. Within the Druids, there were 6 degrees of Druids who all wore white robes but were distinguished by the color of their sash. Oh, kind of look like Taekwondo, huh? The Druids usually did not marry, and upon retiring would live very simple lives, sometimes as recluses in caves or little shacks in the forest where they would pray and meditate. Okay, I don't think I can read this. I shouldn't. I'm running out of time. This is too long. Bringing the mistletoe. Okay, I have way too many things pulled up about the mistletoe. We get it. They liked mistletoe. There it is again. Mistletoe. Let's X out. Oh my goodness. Again with the mistletoe. Ritual of oak and mistletoe. I think I can X out of that. What is this? Divitiacus or Divitiacus. I can't. Was a Druid of the Aedui tribe who lived in Gaul during the 1st century, the only Druid from antiquity whose existence is attested by name. The name may mean avenger. Okay, since we're talking about Druids, maybe I should play this short little clip from the Great Courses.
Beginning of the story, we get a kind of prologue in which we find out about the birth of a king. Suppose...
Hold on, sorry. Viking says, I was a bard in my Baldur's Gate 3 playthrough. In my Baldur's Gate 3 playthrough. That must be game related, video game related. Well then, congrats. That must have been fun.
The Princess Nessa, the daughter of the King of Ulster, was looking out on the road when a Druid named Cathbad came by. She asked him,
yes,
what is today lucky for? Maybe that was just the polite question you asked a Druid. Cathbad answered, presumably thinking quickly, for begetting a king on a queen. Since there was no other man nearby, Nessa and Cathbad have a tryst. And 9 months later, the future king, Conovar, is born. Well, it turned out to be somebody's lucky day, and that somebody was Cathbad the Druid.
Oh, that was me laughing. Okay. Sorry. I'm so professional. I just filmed my television, and that was that. What is today lucky for? All right. This is too much. Llewellyn the Last. We got Llewellyn the Great. I don't know if I can get into these guys. The Book of Kells. The origin and purpose. The Book of Kells was produced by monks of St. Columba's Order of Iona, Scotland, but exactly where it was made is disputed. Theories regarding composition range from its creation on the island of Iona to Kells, Ireland, to Lindisfarne, Britain. It was most likely created, at least in part, at Iona, then brought... Oh, God. And I have a bunch of... this is called a carnix. This is like a noisy war thing that the Celts would use to scare their enemy. They would terrify and they would charge and scream really loud. And I think I've got something pulled up it's like someone tried to recreate the... Where is that? Is that it? Is that it? Oh, there it is. Okay. So you tried to like recreate it. So I don't know if that's what it actually sounded like. I mean, we found these, and by the way, the Celts weren't the only ones who used those, but they sort of became known for them. And supposedly it was very terrifying to the Romans. So, I don't know. Really loud. And they would scream! You knew that that doom was nigh. If you hear that. Okay, which one was that? Can I X out? Jeez. This is another one. Vuvuzela. This might be like a more modern version. Whatever. The lady mentioned that. Here's that cauldron I mentioned that like might not have actually been related to Celts. So you don't want to bark up the wrong tree and start forming all these conclusions about the Celts if this wasn't actually a thing of theirs, but I don't know. It's a famous cauldron that was found, that's all. Might not have actually been. So this is like dead warriors being dumped into this thing here in order to be reborn, I guess. I can't tell what that is. That's funny. Hannibal. Yeah, I'm really sorry. Apparently this is just how I do this. It's a big hodgepodge of stuff. Ariovistus was a leader of the Suebi and other allied Germanic peoples. That's Germanic. Why'd I pull that up? You're not a Celt. Oh, intervention in Gaul. Sometime before Caesar's governorship of Gaul, the Gaulish Arverni and Sicani enlisted Ariovistus's aid in their war against the Aedui. Ah, yes, that's what I was talking about before. These are the guys that wouldn't leave, and they probably regretted asking them for help. Okay, anyway, I don't know. This is too much. There's Vercingetorix. We already kind of covered him. Cardamandua, who's a queen of the Brigantes, a Celtic people living in what is now northern England. She came to power around the time of the Roman conquest of Britain and formed a large tribal agglomeration that became loyal to Rome. Oh. The only account of her is by the Roman historian Tacitus, through which she appeared to have been widely influential in early Roman Britain. Okay, whatever. I'm going to X out another person. Sacred sites and ancient Celtic religion. Okay, we got the severed heads. We got... Especially sacred were the points where movements of water joined like estuaries and river confluences. Okay. Natural sacred sites. That was in response to the music. Yeah, well, I figured. Sorry, yeah. It hypnotized you. Totally threw you for a loop. British Druid. Yeah, again, this isn't necessarily what they looked like. Okay, never mind. Go back. Rituals, offerings, and sacrifices. There's that cauldron again. Gundestrup cauldron. I'm just gonna X out. We're almost done here. The Celtic drinking banquet. I was curious about their drinking practices. I believe they liked their mead and their I think they got wine from the Romans or the Greek, I forget. Celtic drunkenness is a favorite topos of classical authors, much fascinated description to devoted Celtic feasts. Barbarians and others are, of course, generically prone to drunkenness and dissolution, setting them apart from the civilized world. But at least some of the descriptions of drinking Celts recorded by Strabo, Diodorus, and Polybius appear to be founded on actual observation. Excavations were brought to light both isolated flagons or cups and enormous sets of banqueting vessels, including cauldrons, smaller basins, plates, bowls, carving knives, flagons, and drinking horns. With the exception of rare settlement finds and a few stray finds without context, such as our two classes of information, classical authors and archaeological. I'm getting worn out. I don't know if I can. I might have it. Whatever. They had feasts and they drank at the feast. Yeah. The Celts in Britain. Everything you need to know. I can't read all these. This is a lady who I think she was supposed to be a goddess. She was kind of promiscuous, I believe. Queen of Connacht in the Ulster cycle of Irish mythology. Her husband in the core stories of the cycle. Says she had several husbands before him. Were also kings of Connacht. Something to do with a bull. I don't know. There's some part of the story that involves a bull. Like she stole a bull or something. I can't even remember. Marriages and rise to power. How Meb came to power in Connacht and married Alil Mac Mata. Mac means son of. And then Mat. I didn't even get into there's P Celtic and Q Celtic. Forget which is which. I think Wales has P's, the letter P's, and it's called Q Celtic, even though it means they're talking about the letter C. They're talking about the languages having this letter and this language having another letter. So it's like P Celtic and Q Celtic. I don't know why they call it Q Celtic because it's actually about the letter C. There's some explanation for it. Whatever. Okay, she's a goddess. Sorry. Here's Hadrian. He's the one who built Hadrian's Wall. I've got some pictures of that, but unfortunately, I have no idea where because I have too many pulled up. That's what I was looking for before. This is supposedly the etymology of the word druid. Deru is oak, and wid is sight or to see. So there's that. All right. This is talking about Paul's mission, like Paul from the Bible. Jesus, did he travel 2,700 miles? It's Galatia. Yeah, because Galatians in the Bible is his letter to the Galatians. I don't know if he was writing to Celts or to Christians. I mean, they could have been both, I guess. Okay, there's that. Okay, so this is from the Book of Kells. It's probably faded a little bit over time, but they're very vivid and colorful, and I like it. There's writing and there's illustrations, but the illustrations are the cool part. This was in Ireland. This was made in Ireland by Christian Celts, like I mentioned earlier. You can see sort of the melding of Celticness with Christianity as it swept in. There it is. It's like very intricate detail. Just some pictures from that book. What is this? Oh, I just thought this was funny because it has the word faggoting. Faggoting is the term used for making a piece of iron/steel more uniform by folding and stretching several times. The word does not address the process, but the intended result. Okay, anyway, because I was looking into the whole thing with the swords, the droopy swords that were reported, but I don't think so. I don't think their swords bent. I doubt that. Okay, there's more of this. I don't know how many more. There's that again. Those talking about the swords. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm just gonna start Xing out of these things and kind of call it a night. I didn't even really get into the whole English, I don't know. I'm out of time. Russian bot. Droopy swords fits well with faggots of metal. Yeah. I was trying to look into that because I'm just like, I really doubt that their swords were like bending in the middle of battle because Macbeth. Apparently the play Macbeth by Shakespeare kind of makes him look worse than he really was. Duncan the First launched an attack into Moray and was killed in action by Macbeth's troops. Macbeth succeeded him as King of Alba, apparently with little opposition. His 17-year reign was mostly peaceful, although in 1054 he was faced with an English invasion led by Siward, Earl of Northumbria, on behalf of Edward the Confessor. Dang it. I kind of wanted to show like this Kings and Generals things where he shows like one of their battles. Ancient Celts, Anglo-Saxon invasion of Britain. I think it was this one. This is like over an hour long though, but where is it? I think it was
of the Bituriges crossed the Alps.
They were
tersely
fighting
replied,
in Greece.
For the same reason Rome conquers her neighbors. Tensions soon flared, and an armed quarrel.
Hold on.
As is par for the course, the story of the Gallic invasion of Greece survives almost exclusively through the writings
I thought this one was
paddleboarding across the water, where a Greek hoplite in full metal panoply would have had trouble driving away the army which opposed him.
So this
On
is
one fateful day,
the
as
Celts
the sun
fighting the Greek.
rose over the Thermopylae Pass, the Greeks saw a
Battle
horde
of
of spiky-haired,
Thermopylae?
mustachioed muscle men crest over the horizon. The Hellenes formed up, heavily armored hoplites forming into a tight phalanx as they blocked the pass and waited for the coming charge, and thus the battle was joined. Pausanias' account of the initial Gallic assault begins with the cornerstone of Celtic warfare, a deafening, blood-curdling charge. With reckless abandon, tens of thousands of Gauls barreled toward the Greek line, hurling their javelins into the phalanx, then crashing into their foe in a tidal wave of bare-chested fury. However, the enemy they faced was not the disorganized rabble of an infantile Roman Republic, but professional, disciplined men. Against the onslaught, the Greek phalanx held firm, their shields locked and spears bristling. The melee was brutal, with the Gauls struggling like madmen to break the hoplite shield wall. Pierced by arrow or javelin, they did not abate of their passion so long as life remained. Some drew out from their wounds the spears by which they had been hit and threw them at the Greeks, or used them in close fighting.
So they were very ferocious and they didn't give up. And even after they were bleeding and torn up, they would keep fighting as hard as they could until they just absolutely could not anymore.
But no matter how ferociously they hacked away at it, and the heavily armored Greeks could easily cut down their lightly armored counterparts. Although both sides had cavalry, neither could use them, for the bottleneck made flanking maneuvers impossible. Meanwhile, the Hellenic light infantry hurled javelins, slung rocks, and shot arrows at the Gallic horde from behind the front lines, further thinning out their numbers, all while the Athenian navy brought their ships as close to the shore as possible, and from the decks of their triremes, raked the Gauls with arrows and every other kind of missile. Just as it had been for the Persians 3 centuries earlier, for the Gauls, the pass of Thermopylae had become a killing field. After a day of fighting, Brennus had no choice but to concede that the Greek alliance would not be dislodged from their position, and ordered the retreat. This withdrawal was not orderly, with the Gauls routing in a panic. Many crushed.
This is a really good video. I can't watch the whole thing, obviously,
and many others fell into the swamp.
It gives you a good idea about all the battles and how they
Ultimately,
fought.
the Battle of Thermopylae was a decisive victory for the Greeks, with thousands of Gauls lying dead and minimal casualties on the Hellenic end. However, this victory had not ended the Gallic threat for good, for while Brennus had lost a significant chunk of his fighting force and his men were thoroughly demoralized, he was not ready to pack up and go home. Knowing now that he was not able to do so,
in that one for some reason. X out of that. Ambiorix, he's another important person. I saw Tribal Defender posted about him on Twitter. There he is. Oh, he's got the droopy mustache. So I think we can rely on that. Gaulish king of the surroundings, or king protector, was together with Catavolcus, prince of the Baronis, leader of Belgic tribe of northeastern Gaul, where modern Belgium is located. And that was my foot. Oh my god. I'll do it again. Okay, that was my foot. Where modern Belgium is located in the 19th century, it became a Belgian national hero because of his resistance against Julius Caesar, as written in Caesar's Commentary de Bello Gallico. Ambiorix is a Gaulish personal name formed with the prefix ambio attached to rix, king, but the meaning of the first element is debated. Some scholars translate Ambiorix as the king of the surroundings or king of the enclosure by interpreting ambio as a thematized form of ambio. Okay, whatever. What did he say? He resisted the Romans, okay? He was an important hero, and I've run out of time, so I can't. How the Irish and Welsh became Celts. I don't have time. I gotta stop. This is too long. It's over 2 hours long. What ish my nation? W.B. Yeats. I haven't even really been referencing my notes that I have on this either. Like, I have all these notes. I haven't even been looking at them. Yeah. I don't know. There's just too much information. I'm always worried that I'm going to run out of things to say or something, but then I just like overdo it and choose like way too broad of a topic. Oh, whatever. Okay. And this says Celts descended from Spanish fishermen. So yeah, like there's the Celtic fringe, I believe, like the Atlantic coast. I think a lot of the traveling up that coast and the trade routes right there on from the western, the coast, the Atlantic coast, like up from like Spain and Portugal up to the British Isles. A lot of the culture and language or whatever, and actual people, of course, traveled up that way. But they also came from Central Europe and went up that other way. They just sort of ended up, like the places left over now, it's Wales, it's Scotland, it's Ireland, it's Brittany, and Galicia in Spain. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, let's just X out of that. Gallic Wars, we don't have time. Celtic origin, location and time and space. Reconsidering the East-West Celtic debate. I don't know. There's a lot of debate about stuff. This is the Welsh dragon. It's on their flag. And you often see in their stories, it's like a red dragon fighting a white dragon. And I wonder if that has any relation to like the Red Queen and the White Queen. And I just thought of that. I don't know if that's correct, but from Alice in Wonderland. Anyway, so the white dragon was the Anglos, and the red dragon is, I don't know, that's on their flag. Welsh dragon. Oh, and there's the Carnix. There's another one. The Draco Standard. Actually, I don't know what that is, but this is the Carnix that I already showed. Anyway, I'm Xing out. Who are the Celts? Yeah, that's like half the time I was just trying to figure out what the hell because it sort of turned into something else a little bit later. Who are the Welsh? We don't have time. The Celtic Buddha. Oh, I thought this was interesting. It was some sort of, I don't even know. I don't know. Whatever. Let's move on. Journal of Celtic Studies. Nope. No. I'm gonna stop. Roman central heating. Okay, so a lot of the roads in Britain are like the main highways and stuff that they have there were built by the Romans. And apparently they were able to they had central heating. They were able to heat. Invented central heating. Not the type we know today, but a form of underfloor heating that also warmed the walls. I don't know. I just thought that was interesting, but we don't have time. Barry Cunliffe. Yeah, he wrote a book that I listened to the audiobook. J.R.R. Tolkien has this famous quote where he goes, "Celtic is a magic bag into which anything may be put and out of which almost anything may come. Anything is possible in the fabulous Celtic twilight, which is not so much a twilight of the gods as of the reason." The generalized concept of ancient Celts is a tricky one. For starters, the Celts likely didn't recognize themselves as one people or nation, but instead were tribal and would form alliances and or fight with other tribes. The modern use of the term Celt suffers a similar ambiguity. There are, however, some things they had in common, notably language and art. We'll come to language next, but Celtic art, or the art of the Latin style, is similar all the way from Bulgaria to Ireland and is typified by swirly repeating patterns as you see in the Wandsworth Shield below. Okay, anyway. Celtic from the West theory puts Celtic homelands on Western European Atlantic. I don't know. Nope. Celtic migrations. I don't know. I'm just going to X out. Yeah, Barry Cunliffe wrote that book, The Ancient Celts, and it was good. You should read it. What is this?
Follow Lang Focus on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hello everyone, welcome to the Lang Focus channel, and my name is Paul. Today's topic is the Celtic languages. Celtic languages are today spoken mainly in the British Isles, where they've existed alongside English since the Middle Ages. The numbers are not exactly clear because the Celtic languages have gone through declines and revivals, and people have varying degrees of ability, so take these numbers with a grain of salt. But there are around 1 million speakers of Celtic languages in total. That includes Welsh, with around 508,000 speakers, and around 310,000 fluent speakers, mainly in Wales. Then there's Irish Gaelic, which has around 80,000 proficient speakers who use it outside of school, but around 2 million people have at least some knowledge of it, mainly in Ireland and to some extent in Northern Ireland. Then there's Scottish Gaelic, which has around 57,000 native speakers and around 87,000 people.
Russian bot says, "You may have covered this and I missed it, but where was the origin of the Celts geographic-wise?" Yeah, that was sort of right. What I started off with was so it was initially thought that, I think that people still mostly believe that it was what is now Austria-ish, like the Central Europe theory. It's just that the languages seem to be more from the Spain Atlantic kind of coast area and traveled up to the British Islands. But all those archaeological finds that are considered Celtic, a lot of those, the older ones, are in Central Europe, Austria, just above Italy, Archie Furt. So it's kind of hard to, at one point they were just all over. They were spread all over. So it's kind of hard to say exactly where they originated, but I don't know, there's competing theories. There's the west to east, and then there's the east to west and north kind of thing. But I think most people believe it was that Central Europe, Archie, God, modern day, Austria-ish area. It's hard to say, it was so long ago, but yeah, just look at it. It's the language and the archaeology and the art kind of stuff. It's that's how they try to decide that. But they don't necessarily seem to have originated in the same spot, but somehow they ended up mostly kind of nowadays in Britain. So it's kind of weird.
With some knowledge of the language, mainly in Scotland. There is also a small Scottish Gaelic community of around 2,300 people in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, in Canada. Then there's the Breton language, spoken by around 226,000 people, mainly in the Brittany region of France. That figure of 226,000 includes students in bilingual schools. Then there's the Cornish language, spoken in Cornwall, which came close to extinction in the 19th century, but has undergone a revival and now has a few thousand fluent speakers. And then there's the Manx language, spoken on the Isle of Man, which has only around 100 native speakers and a couple thousand people who can speak some Manx. Today, they're not spoken by a very large number of people, and they're mostly limited to the British Isles and to Brittany in France, but historically, the Celtic languages were once spoken over a much larger area than they are today. During the first millennium BCE, they were spoken across much of Europe, from the Iberian from all the Black Sea, and even in part of Asia Minor. One probable Proto-Celtic culture was the Urnfield culture of Central Europe in the late Bronze Age. It was a flourishing culture from around 1200 BCE. Its language was at least likely an early form of Celtic, if not Proto-Celtic, and we think so partly based on place name evidence. Proto-Celtic developed into various Celtic languages, which were spoken over a wide area in Europe. The earliest attested Celtic language is the Lepontic language, the language of the Gola Secca culture that descended from the Urnfield culture. There are about 140 Lepontic inscriptions that were discovered in northern Italy and southern Switzerland. These inscriptions date from around 550 BCE to 100 BCE. The Gola Secca culture had strong connections with the neighboring Hallstatt culture, the major Celtic culture at that time. These languages on the European mainland and in Asia Minor are referred to as the continental languages. This is a geographic grouping, not a linguistic one, and there are no particular linguistic innovations that would make them a linguistic grouping. Here are some continental Celtic languages that might ring a bell. There's the Gaulish language, spoken in Gaul, within present-day France, and Galatian, spoken in Asia Minor around present-day Ankara, Turkey. The continental Celtic languages are all extinct. Celtic speakers began to die out or become assimilated into the Roman culture by around 200 BCE. Before the death and assimilation of Celtic speakers on the mainland, some Celtic speakers might...
So, yeah, Hallstatt is kind of where it seems like a lot of people believe it started, that sort of Austria-ish area. And... But there's also, like, down here where you can't see, there's evidence of Celts in Galicia in the northwest Spain. And there were the Celtiberians down there too, because they traveled all over. It's just hard to
migrated to the British Isles. The Celtic languages that developed in the British Isles are known as the Insular Celtic languages. The Insular Celtic languages are still alive today. There are two groups of Insular Celtic languages: Q Celtic, or Goidelic languages, which include Irish, Scottish, and Manx Gaelic, and the P Celtic, or Brythonic languages, which include Breton, Cornish, and Welsh. These two groups of Insular Celtic languages are not intelligible with each other, but within each group there is some degree of intelligibility depending on the dialects being spoken. The two groups of Insular Celtic languages evolved from a common ancestor. The oldest known Insular Celtic language is a form of Archaic Irish, sometimes called Primitive Irish. It is found in the Ogham inscriptions from the early 4th century CE. Ogham is an alphabet that was used to write Irish as it grew from Primitive Irish into Old Irish, and was used until about the 9th century. Old Irish eventually developed into the modern Irish Gaelic of today. Speakers of Old Irish also migrated to Scotland, where it eventually developed into Scottish Gaelic, and to the Isle of Man, where it evolved into Manx. While Primitive Irish arose in Ireland, Common Brythonic arose in Great Britain. Common Brythonic is the ancestor of all the P-Celtic or Brythonic languages. The Pictish language, which went extinct by the 12th century CE, may have been a Brythonic language, but it's possible that Pictish was related...
Hold on. So, I believe this is where... Is this where Hadrian's Wall was? Like, right where the... Or was it down here? But there was one wall down here, and then there was another one above that that was abandoned. They couldn't really... The Romans couldn't really hold on to it. And it was mostly just like a trading post, what they had going on there in Britain. It wasn't really, I don't know. Someone mentioned there were some senators, some Roman senators who were like, what are we doing up there? Why are we up there? But let's try to find Wall. Where is the word wall? No. Hadrian's Wall and the Antoinette Wall. Is that right? I hope sometimes it autocorrects what I type in it. Yeah. WTF. What? What are you referring to?
To Brythonic, but not descended from it. Over the course of a few centuries, Brythonic dialects evolved into Welsh, Cornish, Breton, and Cumbric, which is extinct. The Celtic languages were under great pressure during this time. Breton is in fact spoken in continental Europe, in the Brittany region of France, even though it's an insular Celtic language. It has been spoken there since the 6th century CE, when some Celtic speakers fled during the Anglo-Saxon invasion of Britain. Coexistence with English. Britain was ruled by the Romans from 43 CE to 410 CE, but after the departure of the Romans, the Anglo-Saxons began to invade Britain. In Britain, the Anglo-Saxons conquered the Celtic peoples and either eliminated them or intermarried with them, depending on the source you consult, eventually replacing the Celtic languages with Old English, but not in Wales and Cornwall, which remained Celtic. In Scotland, Gaelic speakers from Ireland migrated to the west coast around the same time that Anglo-Saxons migrated to the east coast. Then Scottish Gaelic began to develop. In Scotland, Gaelic coexisted with the Old English dialects that would later develop into Scots and Scots English. And in the year 1707, Scotland formed a union with England and Wales, the Kingdom of Great Britain. After that, Scottish Gaelic began to diminish in use, partly because English was the language of universal education. Scottish Gaelic is today considered definitely endangered by UNESCO's World Language Project. Wales came under the control of England in the year 1282. Welsh has continued to be spoken until the present day, but for a long time English was given preference as the official language, and in the 19th and 20th centuries, Welsh declined rapidly in favor of English. But efforts have been made to conserve the Welsh language, and everybody learns at least some of it in school. And some people take their entire public school education in Welsh. And as I mentioned before, it currently has hundreds of thousands of native speakers. Cornwall was under English control by the mid-9th century. Their language began to disappear after England passed the Act of Uniformity in 1558. This was a law that made English the sole language of church services. The Cornish language almost became extinct, and it was actually temporarily declared extinct by UNESCO. But a revival movement in the 20th century has given new life to the language, and it is now taught in some schools. And there are now about 300 fluent Cornish speakers. On the Isle of Man, the Manx language is in a similar situation. It almost became extinct, but a revival movement has resulted in a few hundred fluent speakers of the language. There is also a Manx language primary school there, creating a new generation of Manx speakers. Ireland became an English colony from 1169 to 1949. Irish remained the majority language there until the 19th century, when it was overtaken by English. Despite strong intentions to support and revive the Irish language, it continues to decline in favor of English. It is taught in schools, but not many people use the language of their own volition outside of schools.
It's kind of
similar
sad.
to Scottish Gaelic, it is considered definitely endangered.
They're
The
definitely
Brittany
worth
region
preserving.
became part of France in the 16th century. In France, there is no official recognition of any regional languages. The majority of Breton speakers today are in their 60s or older, and the number of speakers could be dropping by 10,000 per year. It is considered severely endangered by UNESCO. Now let's look at some features of Celtic languages in general. Celtic languages feature VSO word order. Actually, continental Celtic languages probably had freer word order, but let's focus on the living Celtic languages. Here's an example of VSO word order in Irish Gaelic. This sentence means, I saw the man this morning.
Connacht me and fair imagine.
Word for word, it's see, past tense, I, the
Okay, we don't need to watch the rest of this. Okay, I gotta stop. Galatians, Magmel. This was like in Irish mythology. Magmel is one of the names for the Celtic otherworld, a mythical realm achievable through death and or glory. Okay, anyway, I'm sure it's very interesting, but again, this is just too much. Gods and goddesses, the Brigid, ancient religion of the Celts. We got the Druids. All right, I gotta stop. I'm so sorry. Let's get out of here. That was the Celts. There's the Carnix. That's the picture I used for the thing. They were the largest group in ancient Europe, described as barbaric warriors. Burial mounds reveal a complex society. The wheeled couch. The Celts may have been one of the first Europeans to wear pants. Famous for their colorful wool textiles, forerunners of the famous Scottish tartan. And while only a few tantalizing scraps of these textiles, blah, 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 blah. Okay, hold on. This song is beautiful. Let's listen to it. I love it. Probably can't listen to the whole thing because it's like 8 minutes long. But, you know, from Last of the Mohicans. Celtic. Orchestra. Okay, and I saw this guy playing it too. Fiddlers are interesting because I play violin, not very well anymore, I guess, but my mom taught me as a kid. She's a lot better than me, but she taught me to play properly using the Japanese method of Suzuki. I don't know why I said properly. I guess my point was when I watched this guy play, I was like, he's holding his bow weird. And I don't know. Who cares as long as it sounds good? But it's that same song, but. Yeah. Play Lisa Gerrard's version of The Wind That Shakes the Barley. Oh, is it depressing? I like depressing. I mean, I kind of like sad. It's depressing? Depressing song? Fiddlers are like wild. They're wild violinists. They play however they want. There's this guy named Gerard of Wales, who talked about the Irish. He wrote about them, and he talked a lot of shit, but he liked the music. a lot of Irish folk music is so dark. Huh. I mean, just the sound, like, I kind of want to hear it. Lisa Hard. Let's check it out. Oh, okay. So there is actual singing. I don't know if you wanted the live version, but.
I sat within the barley green. I sat me with my true love. My sad heart strove the two.
It's pretty. Oh, the subject matter. Okay.
The old for her, the new that made me think of Ireland dearly. While soft the wind blew down the glade and shook the golden barley.
It's pretty.
'Twas hard the woeful words to frame, to break the ties that bound us, and harder still to bear the shame of foreign chains around us. And so I said, the mountain glen I'll meet at morning early, and I'll join the bold united men, while soft winds shook the barley. 'Twas sad I kissed away her tears, my fond arm round her flinging.
Sorry, just one sec. This is Hadrian's Wall today. It's pretty. I mean, it doesn't look very tall. Oh, did the ground like grow up under it? Okay, moving on. There it is too.
From out the wild woods ringing, a bullet pierced my true love's side in life's young spring so early, and on my breast in blood she died, while soft winds shook the barley. But blood for blood, without remorse, I've ta'en to her hollow. I've laid my true love's clay-like corpse, where I'll fall soon must follow. Around her grave I've wandered drear, in night and morning air.
Okay, it's called the Antonine Wall, so it did do some stupid autocorrect on me. Antonine Wall was abandoned. Hadrian's Wall is still there.
With breaking heart when near I hear the wind shakes the barley.
Pretty. I like it. I like it. I guess that just about does it. Dang it. I'm gonna think. I always think of stuff after that I wish I said. Oh, Brehon Law. That was like their version of law. That's a whole thing. Yeah. You know, there's St. Patrick's coming up. That's a whole thing I could have gotten into, but the Devil's Bridge. That's like, there's a story about the Devil's Bridge. There's 3 bridges over this part of the Minack Gorge, each one built successfully over the others. A woman and a cow got stuck on one side of the gorge, unable to cross. The devil appeared and said that he would build a bridge over the gorge in exchange for the soul of the first living creature to cross it. The devil finished the bridge and waited in anticipation for the first thing to cross it. The woman cunningly threw a piece of bread across the bridge and her dog ran after it, meaning the devil had to be satisfied with the soul of the dog. And this guy went there.
So here is the little map going, little devil, yeah. So this place has some really weird, like, old...
I think it's in Wales.
Folklore. The story behind it is, so there's all these waterfalls, this massive, like, really far down ditch with super strong...
Show it.
One day she woke up and a cow was grazing on the other side, which is really unusual. Like, there's no way it could have got there. There's no bridge or anything. And apparently the devil appeared and said, I will build you a bridge. And if I build that...
Okay, I just told that story. But okay, here's a little bit about the naked fighting. The Celts were known in ancient times as the dying Gaul. You always see that. The Celtic cult of nudity. Towards the end of the 3rd century BC, an attempt was made by a coalition of Celtic tribes from Cisalpine Gaul to attack the Roman Republic. The coalition included the Insurberes, the Boii, and the Tarishi. One of the decisive battles during this war was the Battle of Telamon, which was fought in 225 BCE. From Polybius' account of this battle, we hear about a tribe of Celtic warriors known as the Jaesate, whom the ancient author describes as having the habit of fighting naked. I don't know. Psychological warfare with the loud noises. Loud noises! All right, let's get out of here. I've said that like 16 times. Let's do it for real this time. There's Boudica, bloody revolt against the Romans. But in the end, they didn't quite make it. I gotta stop. Hannibal, Devil's Bridge. I wish he would show the bridge.
They built another one on top. So you've got 3 different bridges dating back really far. I think the first one's like the whole hundreds of years old. I think the last one was built in 1901 or something. But yeah, it's crazy. Like, see how far down it is as well. Absolute madness. But that's the lore of the bridges. But
I would like to visit that bridge. Wouldn't mind that. I didn't really get to sightsee much when I was in Wales.
You got it from both sides. It just keeps on going down. Got much closer.
Yeah, so a lot of their folk stories are like associated with specific locations, which I think is cool because you can go visit them, and yeah, I guess that's it. That's it. We're done. Here's the deities comparison chart. There's a bunch of the deities. Would have liked to get more into that. One of these days I'll focus on a topic that's less broad and not feel like I'm having to leave stuff out all the time. Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate you very much. Join us on Telegram. And have a good night. Have a good weekend, everybody. Celts! Okay, bye.